עזרי מעם השם, עושה שמיים וארץ, אל יתן למות רגליך, אל ינום שומרך. הנה לא ינום ולא יישן שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שיר למעלות, אשא עיניי אל ההרים, אוי מאין יבוא עזרי. שמים בארץ, ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. שומר ישראל, השם שומרך, השם צילך, על יד ימינך. יומם השמש לא יככה, וירח בלילה, השם ישמורך מכל רע, ישמור את נפשך, השם ישמור צאתך ובואך, מעתה ועד עולם. אוי אוי מקימי מעפר טל, מהשפות ירים אביון, אוי להושיבי עם נדיבי אמור, תגנאי נאי 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 תנאי נאי נאי תנאי נאי 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 נאי. כי השם אלוקינו המקביל לשבת, אוי בשמיים ובארץ, אוי מקימי מעפר דל, מהשפות ירים אביון, אוי להושיב
Okay. Let's turn the music down a little bit. All right. Welcome to this week's World Alliance of Qara'im Torah study. I am Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. Did I just say that? And welcome to the study. First of all, let's do a sound check. Can everybody hear me? Can I just get a plus or a thumbs up or something just to make sure the sound is good? Let's get rid of this. Stop the music for a second. Okay. So sound check. Can you guys hear me? Yes. Okay, great. All right. Excellent. All right. So let me just share the screen a little bit differently here. Here we go. Okay. So our parasha. So that is going to be Exodus, basically Exodus 10 through the middle of Exodus 13. So we've got 3.5 chapters to cover, which is a little bit shorter than some of the other parshas we've been covering. And we're going to see a lot in this parsha about the hardening or the making heavy of Pharaoh's heart. In other words, Pharaoh, the king of Egypt, is going to be faced with plague after plague as we start this parsha in chapter 10. We're already up to the 8th plague, right? And we're going to go through the 9th and 10th plagues and then the actual Exodus. And we're going to see Pharaoh's heart constantly hardened. He sees his country being destroyed before his eyes, and yet his is hardened. And I actually had a thought, I really like to keep it away from politics to a certain degree, but politics and Torah and all this stuff are intertwined. And I just saw an analogy by what's going on in the United States right now. So we have some really, really stupid leaders, Joe Biden, who, barely, his eyes are barely look open when he talks, and all of the rest of the left promoting their ridiculous, Sodom and Gomorrah agenda, which is bringing the United States and therefore the entire West to destruction. And so there's a statement, or there's a phrase, I can't remember who said it. Okay, I'm gonna actually just look it up, which is, let's see here, those who God wishes to destroy. There it is. It's already coming up. And I think it's a Wikipedia article. Destroy. Sometimes give it a cause of deal, etc., etc. So where is it from? Classical origins. So it's Hercules play Antigone, and etc., etc. And then there are a lot of usages, right? So whom the gods would destroy, they first make mad, right? So if God wants to destroy an individual, if God wants to destroy a country, if God wants to destroy a culture, he first makes them mad. We see this explicitly in the Torah in the case of Shaul, in the case of King Saul, right? We see repeatedly that basically Saul goes mad. And it says that that a nichneset bo ruach ra'ah, an evil spirit, entered into him, which doesn't mean an external evil spirit. It basically just means a spirit of madness, or a depression, a madness entered into him. And this leads basically directly to his destruction, right? Because he makes worse and worse decisions. And finally, the last decision he makes is when he's up against the Philistines, and Samuel, his prophet, the one who's been guiding him all along, dies. Then he goes to the witch of Endor, and he asks the witch of Endor to bring up Samuel from the dead, and speaks to Samuel and says, what is my fate? And Samuel responds, well, your fate is that you're going to be here with me tomorrow. In other words, that you're going to die, which is exactly what happens. So we see Shaul go basically progressively mad, more and more mad, meaning crazy, until it leads to his own destruction, and he dies in battle against the Philistines, right? So I relate this to what's going on with the United States of America. Okay, the United States is now being dragged, and by proxy, the entire West is being dragged into this war with the Ukraine. And even though they realize that this war could lead, no exaggeration, no joke, to nuclear conflict, to nuclear war, to all-out World War III, they see, but they're just they are not able to stop. They're just getting themselves deeper and deeper and deeper into it. Okay, it's almost like Pharaoh when he sees his nation, Egypt, being destroyed before him. Okay, he can't stop. Okay, when a plague occurs, he relents. He says, okay, I'll stop. Please make the plague stop, and I'll let the children of Israel go. And then as soon as the plague relents, then he goes right back at it, and he says, no, the children of Israel can't go. We saw that in last week's parsha. We're going to see that again in this. And it's here, even though the United States and the West dragged further and further into what could very seriously end in nuclear conflict, because Putin has explicitly said that if he needs to, he'll use nuclear weapons. And that guy is not fooling around. Okay, Putin is not like Biden or one of these guys who talks a big game but doesn't really do much of anything. Putin is dead serious, and needless to say, the Russian Empire, the Russian culture goes back, I don't know, at least 1,000 years. When is it? The 900s or something? It was the founding of Rus and Kiev. They have a very long, detailed culture, and they've survived many wars, and they're a huge country. I think they are the largest country in the world by landmass, if I'm not mistaken. They survived World War I, they survived World War II, they survived many other wars over their history. And they're not going to lose this war one way or another. It's not going to destroy Russia, a culture that's been around for 1,000 years. Okay. By contrast, sad to say, yes, the United States is an extension of European culture, which has also been around for hundreds, thousands of years, or 2,000 years or so, we should say, since the fall of the Roman Empire, 1,500 years. But the United States has only been around for 200 and we're coming up on 75 years. Is that 200 and no? We're coming up on 250 years. Okay, it's a very young country. It really has not weathered a lot of storms. It doesn't have the wisdom and knowledge that some of these more ancient cultures, such as, let's say, China, Russia, might have. And so the United States, in its youth and its arrogance, is being dragged into this war with the Ukraine, with Russia in the Ukraine, that could very easily end up in its complete destruction, annihilation, or at least, end of its existence as it currently is. And nonetheless, even though the leaders, the quote unquote leaders of the United States and the West, see that this is where it's heading, they cannot relent. It's almost as if God is hardening their hearts, just as God hardened Pharaoh's heart, just as he saw his Egypt being destroyed right before his very eyes, but could not stop out of arrogance, out of belief that he doesn't have to listen to the Yahweh, the God of Israel, that he only has to listen that he's God, right? Because the ancient Egyptians, the Egyptian pharaohs believed that they were God incarnate. I think maybe Biden believes he's God incarnate as well, but or some, at least for sure Obama did. At any rate, it's the same kind of phenomenon. They just cannot back down and realize that there's something stronger, higher, better than they are. And so through their arrogance, through their hubris, they get dragged. Yeah, we really are doomed. And this, by the way, this is Mariana McNana. This is a very close friend of mine, one of my favorite people on the planet, on this planet, from my skydiving community, and so I'm so glad she's here. Welcome. I won't say your real name. That's up to you to reveal it or not, but I'm so glad you're here and you can join us. So we see that the West is, even though they realize where this is all heading, and in their arrogance, they think that they can head deeper and deeper into the pit, or they can dig a deeper and deeper pit without falling into it. Just as Pharaoh over Egypt thought that he could ignore the plagues, even though they were getting progressively more and more severe, there would be no consequences, because his heart was being hardened. He was being made more and more stubborn. So, yeah, pride is the biggest sin. So there's a famous statement in the book of Psalms. I'm sorry, in the book of Proverbs. Let's find it in the Hebrew. Okay. I've got to find the exact Proverbs 16:18. Proverbs 16:18. So let's check that out. Okay. So this is right here. This is Proverbs verse 16:18. It says, "Lifnei shever gaon, lifnei kishalon govah ruach." So before shever is like a breaking, like a destruction. Gaon is pride. So before a fall, or before a crisis before there is a crisis, there is pride. Lifnei kishalon govah ruach, and before kishalon is another word meaning kind of like failure. Govah ruach means haughtiness of spirit, or literally govah means high spirits, or tall, or shall we say haughtiness of spirit, right? So that's Proverbs 16:18, right? And so we see that pride leads. This is exactly what we see happening in the United States. So when we read through this parsha, and we see what's happening with Pharaoh and what's happening with Egypt, and we see that even though his beloved Egypt is being destroyed before his very eyes, because he believes he's God incarnate, he does not want to recognize Yahweh, the God of Israel. He does not want to recognize Yud Hey Vav Hey Yahweh, Jehovah, some people may call him, but I said that I've switched over to Yahweh based on some studying that I've done over the past year. So he does not want to recognize that there's a God higher than he is, okay, that someone is the boss, he is not the boss, and therefore he allows his heart is hardened, even though he sees Egypt being destroyed before his eyes, and he's basically led deeper and deeper into destruction until all of Egypt is completely destroyed, and the Israelites are freed directly by God in the killing of the firstborn, as we'll see in this portion. Okay, so with that being said, keep that in mind as we go through. Keep in mind the incredible similarity, or the incredible relevance that what we're going to see happening with Pharaoh has to the events that are happening today in the West and in the United States. The United States was a great country in so many ways, and I remember as a child the way it was, and I look at it now, and it's not even the same country, really. They might as well just change the name already, because it has nothing in common with the United States that I grew up in. And it really has turned into a Sodom and Gomorrah, right? In the news this week, we had this another statue of, what was it? I know it was on Tucker Carlson, of what's her face, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, which, by the way, I will tell you a very interesting story about in a second. So a statue of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because my friend calls her Ruth Beta Blockers Ginsburg, looking like some kind of ancient pagan god. Ginsburg statue. There we go. Statue, 7 foot. There we go. Right. It was put on top of some courthouse in New York City. Is that the one? There it is. I think that's it. With horns, right? Which kind of harkens back to some of the ancient gods, like the Baalim, right? Were bulls with horns on their heads. So this horn is very much a pagan symbol. This was hoisted on top of some courthouse. in New York. There was also a story a couple of years ago that I remember that a temple to Baal was set up in Manhattan, if I remember correctly. This was maybe like 2 or 3 years ago, 3 years ago approximately, maybe it was 4 years ago. I can't remember where it is. I can't find it right now. At any rate, you get the idea, right? The United States and the West is turning farther and farther away. Yeah, exactly. Remind me of Ram or goat. Exactly. The United States is turning farther and farther away from God and turning more and more towards the same sins that we saw in Sodom and Gomorrah, literally. And as I always say, and as I've said for years, when a society goes south, they all go south in the same way, okay? Ancient Greece, ancient Rome, it's all the same stuff. It's violence, it's murder, it's sexual depravity, it's usury, right? It's usurious rates of interest. I mean, look at what the credit card companies in the United States of America charge. You know, they can charge up to 25% interest per year, which is usurious, right? I don't even know if the mafia charges that much. And so it's when a society goes away from God, it always does so in the same way. And it always does so in the way that's already predicted in the Torah. If you look in Leviticus chapter 18, 19, 20, you see already it says what the sins of Canaan were, what of Egypt were, right? It's idol worship, it's child sacrifice, it's sexual depravity, it's violence, murder, all the stuff that we're warned again is essentially in the Ten Commandments. And the United States, again, in its youth, in its arrogance, in its stupidity, believes that it's breaking new grounds. Okay, when I just saw a video before, which was very disturbing, about a nursery school teacher teaching children that, you know, not everybody's a boy or a girl, that there's some people who don't know what they are yet. They don't know whether they're a boy or a girl. I mean, it's right. I mean, I don't have to tell anyone here. We're all on the same page, right? But they think, the United States thinks it's breaking new ground, but it's not breaking new ground. It's the same insanity and the same craziness that all of the societies, all of the empires, all the countries that have fallen in the past, they went exactly down this very path. The United States, just through its what I like to call historic myopia, right? It can't see towards the future. It can't see towards the past. Thinks in its stupidity that it's breaking new ground, and it's not breaking any new ground. These are all tried and true methods by the ancient Romans, the ancient Greeks, and a million other ancient cultures that all fell when they left the ways of God, when they left the ways of Yahweh, the God of Israel, the Elohim of Israel, and they went off the path. They all did it in exactly the same way. It was always violence and usury and sexual depravity and all kinds of other insanity. There's nothing new under the sun, right? As the famous statement in the book of Ecclesiastes says. Let's find that one, and then we'll start with this week's parsha. Okay, there's nothing new under the sun. This is one of my favorite books. I mean, they're all great, but one of my favorite books in the Tanakh is the book of Ecclesiastes. It's basically like an ancient Israelite philosophical treatise. Beats the heck out of Plato and Sophocles and all of these, or Socrates and all of these people. Okay, so we are looking at, where is it? Is it not listing chapter and verse? I think it's, anyway, here it is. Ein kol hadash tachat shemesh. There's nothing new under the sun. Okay, and I actually would like to find it. Ecclesiastes 1:9. There we go. So let's check out Ecclesiastes 1:9. Ecclesiastes 1. Let's get it in the Hebrew. And you can all follow along in English or whatever your native language is, if you wish. So Ecclesiastes 1:9, okay? Let's start with verse 4, okay? I'll just go through it rather quickly, okay? So this is Ecclesiastes chapter 1, verse 4. Dor holech v'dor ba v'ha'aretz le'olam omedet. A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth for eternity stands, or forever stands, okay, or stays the same as, okay. Uzarach hashemesh uba hashemesh ve'el mikomo sho'ef zorech husham. The sun rises and the sun sets, and to its place it how would you translate sho'ef into English? It yearns, or it travels. Zorech husham, and from there it glows once again. In other words, what what King Solomon, who wrote Ecclesiastes, is saying is that there are these cycles that are just repeated, right? Generations come and go. The sun rises again, okay? הולך דרום, וסובב אל צפון, סובב, הולך הרוח, ועל סביבתו שב הרוח, okay? It goes to the south, and then it returns to the north. Again, probably here speaking about the sun, although it's unclear, it might be speaking about the wind, but at any rate, if it's talking about the sun going to the south and then back to the north, now we're talking about the seasonal changes, right? We know in the wintertime, the sun goes towards the south. In the summertime, it goes towards the north. On the equinoxes, if you look at the sunset, it's going to be, no matter where you are on the earth, it's going to be exactly due west, or it's going to be setting due west and rising due east. If you're in the northern hemisphere, actually if you're in any hemisphere, then in our summertime, it's going to be rising and setting to the north of east. I'm sorry, rising north of east, and in the wintertime, in our wintertime, rising south of east, right? So that's so the wind goes around and around, and on its circuits it returns, right? So again, what Solomon is saying here, he's talking about all of these cycles, right? Everything repeats itself, right? There's nothing new, is where it's going to all lead to, is what he's going to say in verse 9, okay? All of the rivers go towards the sea, but the sea is still not full. And to the place where the rivers go, from there they go back and they go again. Again, he's talking about cycles repeating themselves, right? Here we have the water cycle, right? Water flows down the rivers into the sea, eventually gets evaporated, goes up into the clouds, condenses, turns to rain, fills up the river, which flow back to the sea. It's returning again and again. Everything, or all things, are wearying. They weary us. They tire us out. A person cannot speak. The eye is never satisfied from seeing. And the ear is never satisfied, or is never full of hearing, right? And here is the verse I wanted to get to. What was is what will be. And that which was done is that which will be done. And there is nothing new under the sun. Okay, and let's even go on another verse or two. There's a thing that someone may say, or that people may say, look, this is new. It already was, forever, or for eternity in the past, or many times in the past. For times in the past that were before us. Okay? But there is no remembrance of this. There is no remembrance of the earlier ones, of the original ones, and also for the later ones that will be, and there will not be remembrance of, in other words, the past, of now, which will be in the later times. Okay, so this is what Solomon is saying, basically, right? That cycles repeat themselves over and over and over again, and when we think that something new is happening, it's happened a million times before. When the United States thinks it's breaking new ground, it's discovered this brand new thing that there's such a thing as human beings that are neither boys nor girls, and wow, this is groundbreaking, and the world has never realized this before, and we're heading towards a new utopia. This is all. There's so many societies in the past that have already done this, right? In fact, I know someone who took a class in what was the name of that class, folk? Gender something or other? Anthropology, sex, and gender, and the whole class was about various societies that had variations of what we're seeing now in the West, with 3 genders, 4 genders, 3 spirits, all this kind of stuff. It's all been tried a million times before, and many of these societies no longer exist because they were destroyed. Okay, So there's nothing new under the sun. The United States is not breaking new ground. The United States is just repeating the same old patterns, the same old mistakes that so many cultures have repeated in the past, which has resulted in their destruction. Okay. All right. So with all that being said, we're now going to get into this week's parsha, Parshat Bo. Okay. Exodus 10. So just a quick review. We were going through the plague. We didn't get a chance chapter, but we spoke about frogs, gnats, flies. Here we have Pharaoh's heart hardened, right, which happens a bunch of times. And then we've got livestock, boils, hail, etc. I think I'm going to go back a little bit, and I'm going to just read through very quickly until the end of chapter 9, because I want to get this week's parsha in context. And by the way, for those of you who are new, join parsha means. The word parsha means this week's chunk, this week's section of the Torah, of the Old Testament, of the Pentateuch, the 5 books of Moses. Okay, so when you hear me say the word parashah, it just means this week's reading in the Old Testament. Okay, so hail. Let's start with here. I'm just going to read through very quickly. Please follow along in your English translations or whichever language you prefer. If you're trying to learn Hebrew, or if you're proficient in Hebrew, then you can follow along with English next to Hebrew, however you want to do it. I'm going to be reading in the Hebrew. I'll give quick, not word-for-word translations in this chapter because I don't want to dive in deep until we get to this week's section. This is still the end of last week's section, but I'll give paraphrases, kind of like off-the-cuff translations of each of the verses. And if we come across something that warrants stopping and talking about a little bit more in depth, we'll do so. Okay, so we're in Exodus chapter 9, verse 13. And I'm going to go ahead and read. ויאמר יהוה אל משה, התייצב לפני פרעה, ואמרת אליו, כה אמר יהוה אלוהי העברים, שלח את עמי ויעבדוני. So Yahweh said to Moshe, so this is now God speaking to Moshe, rise up early in the morning and position yourself in front of Pharaoh and say to him, so says Yahweh Elohei Ivrim, so says Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, Shalach et ami, let my people go, v'yavduni, so that they may worship me, so that they may serve me. Verse 14. Ki ba'am hazot, ani sholech et kol magifotay el libcha, u'be'avadecha, u'be'amcha ba'avur teda ki en kamoni b'chol ha'aretz. Because this time, I'm going to send all of my magifotay, I'm going to send all of my plagues straight to your heart, el libecha, el libcha, and upon your servants and upon your people, in order that you should know there is no other, the implication meaning no other God like me in all of the world. Okay, so this is, and I'll just make a side point. A lot of times you'll hear the Torah, you'll hear the Tanakh, and by the way, again, I just want to give some new people here who maybe don't know some of the words that we use over and over again in Hebrew. So Tanakh stands for the entire Old Testament, meaning the Torah, the 5 books of Moses, the prophets, and the writings. Tanakh is Rashi Tevot. How do you say that again in English? It's abbreviation for Torah, Nevi'im, and Ketuvim. Torah means the Pentateuch, Nevi'im means the prophets, and the Ketuvim means the writings. Okay, so when you hear me say the word Tanakh, I'm talking about the Old Testament. Okay. So yes, so to know that there was no other God, there's no other like me in all of the world, right? So a lot of times God will refer to other gods as if they exist, right? So it says there's no other God like me in all the world. Does this imply that the Torah believes that there are other gods that exist? We've spoken about this many times. No, of course it doesn't. Okay, it's just a rhetorical way of saying that the other nations believe that there are these other gods, right? Baal and Dagan and Heramosh and all of the gods of the surrounding nations and the various Baalim, right? So the Torah is rhetorically saying that there are no other gods because the other nations believe that there are gods, but or there is no other gods like me because the other nations believe that there are other gods, right? But of course, the Torah never has, does not, and never will believe that the existence of any other God besides the one God, Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of Israel. Okay? Ki ata shalachti et yadi wa'ach otcha et amcha v'dever u'tichached min haaretz. Because now I'm going to send my hand out. I'm going to stretch my hand out, v'ach otcha, and I'm going to smite you and your people. B'daver, daver is pestilence. V'tichached min haaretz, and you'll be made extinct from the land. You'll disappear from the land. In modern Hebrew, the word nekhad means to become extinct. So if you want to talk about the dinosaurs become extinct, you would use the word in modern Hebrew of nekhadu. They became extinct. Okay. Verse 16. And because of this, I have kept you alive. Okay. I've left you standing. In order that I should show you my power. In order to let my name be proclaimed, or so that my name is told throughout all of the world. Okay, so this is a theme we've seen a number of times so far in the whole, ever since the beginning of the book of Exodus, basically, that one of the reasons it's stated again and again that Yahweh is bringing the plagues is so that the entire world will know who he is. The entire world will see his power, not just the Israelites, not just the Egyptians, excuse me, but the entire world. The name of the God of Israel, the name of Yahweh, will go out across the entire world, and the entire world will know who he is. And we know at the beginning of this parsha, right, and one of my favorite verses in this entire story that I've pointed to many, many times is that, well, let's find it. I believe it's in Exodus chapter 4. So we've got to go to Exodus chapter 4, and we see how Pharaoh starts off. Let's see where it is. I've got to find it. 1 second. Just give me a second here. Bear with me. Maybe it's verse 3. No, verse 3 is still, he's in the desert. Moses leaves for Egypt. So it's not 4. It's got to be later. It's verse 5. Here we go. I should remember this. I should remember chapter and verse for this one. I should remember. Exodus 5:2. So Moshe first comes to Pharaoh and says, "Let my people go." And what does Pharaoh say? One of my favorite verses. 1 second, I'm just gonna get some water. My sparkling water. I couldn't live without it, especially when I'm doing these Torah studies. So Moshe says, "Let my people go." Shalach et ami. The famous phrase, "Let my people go," in Hebrew is shalach et ami, literally send out my people. Am is people or nation. Shalach, shaleach is to send, and et is it's what's called the objective particle, right? We won't get into now, right? So let my people go. And what does Pharaoh say on Moshe's first "let my people go" request? Wayomer Pharaoh, and Pharaoh said, "Mi Yahweh, asher yishma b'kolo." Who is Yahweh? Who is this Yahweh? You said Yahweh says, "Let my people go." Who's Yahweh? I never heard of this God before. What do you come bringing me your stupid gods for? Okay, asher yishma b'kolo. Who is Yahweh that I should listen to his voice? Lishalach et Yisrael, to let Israel go. Lo yadati et Yahweh. I've never heard of this Yahweh. V'gam et Yisrael lo ashalech, and I have no intention of letting Israel go. So that's Pharaoh's first interaction. That's the first time Pharaoh hears about this new God, Yahweh. He's never heard of him before. And Pharaoh's God, no way, get out of here, Moshe. You're bothering me, you and your stupid made-up imaginary friends in the sky, okay? I'm not listening. I've never heard of your God, Yahweh. And remember, Yahweh's name, the name Yahweh to Moses just 2 chapters ago, right? When he's out in the whole burning bush incident. It's the first time that God reveals his true name, Yahweh, to anybody, right? To Moses. Okay? So that is how Pharaoh's first reaction to Yahweh is. We see that by the end of the plagues, not only does Pharaoh know who Yahweh is, this Yahweh, who he said, I don't know who your stupid little imaginary friend is. Yahweh has destroyed his entire country, has destroyed his nation, will kill all of the firstborn of his people due to his obstinance. It's never God's fault. God is always is righteous. It's always we who bring punishments upon ourselves. Well, maybe a bit more complicated than that. I have to read the book of Job, but we won't go in that direction right now. But at any rate, in general, if something happens to us, it's our fault, right? So it's not that God killed the firstborn. Pharaoh killed his own firstborn because he was so obstinate, he was so stubborn that he caused that reaction. Okay, so at any rate, by the end of the 10 plagues, we're going to see that Pharaoh not only knows who Yahweh is, he's begging Moshe to pray to Yahweh for him. Okay, so Pharaoh, who thought he was a god, no longer thinks he's a god. Now he's praying to the true God of the heaven and earth, the true creator of the heaven and earth, to save him, and asking Moshe, who he basically said, "Get away from my face," Amen. Thank you, Ravencraft. And now he's begging Moshe to pray to this God Yahweh, who he wouldn't even recognize the existence of, and he just basically, basically poo-pooed this God as if he was just a nothing, and later on is begging to him. Okay, let's keep that in mind when we come across it. Okay, verse 16. Okay, we read that already. So I've kept you alive basically so that you could see my strength and that my name will be told throughout the entire world. You're still mistolel, you're still making yourself big. You're still exalting yourself against my people by refusing to send them. So now we get to the next plague, which is going to be hail. הנני ממטיר כעת מחר ברד כבד מאוד אשר לא היה כמוהו במצרים למין היום היבזדה ועד עתה. So behold, this is now God speaking to Pharaoh through Moshe. Behold, I am now going to rain down tomorrow a heavy hail, or a heavy hailstorm, a very heavy hailstorm. אשר לא היה כמוהו במצרים. That there has never been anything like it in Egypt. Again, I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to go word for word here. There's never been anything like it in Egypt. From the day of its foundation, from the day it was founded until now. In other words, this hailstorm is going to be like nothing you've ever seen before. It's going to be the Hurricane Sandy or the Hurricane Katrina of Egypt, and 1,000 times worse. Okay, verse 19. את מקנך ואת כל אשר לך בשדה, כל האדם והבהמה אשר ימצא בשדה ולא יאסף הביתה ירד עליהם הברד ומתו. Okay. Basically, to paraphrase there, so Moshe is actually giving a warning. He's actually being nice to the Egyptians here, and he's telling Pharaoh, tell everybody to take their livestock, their animals inside, because any livestock that's left outside they're going to die. Okay, so Moshe is actually being nice. Okay, he didn't even have to tell them to save their own livestock. And remember, the Egyptians, they were an agrarian society because they had the Nile River. The Nile River had many canals and tributaries which basically watered their fields. In fact, most of Egypt basically was right along the Nile River, except when you get out to the Nile Delta. It was right along the Nile River and extended all the way down from Lower Egypt, which were the plains, to Upper Egypt, which were the mountains near the source of the, I don't know, the source of the Nile. I think the source of the Nile is actually, where's the source of the Nile? In Ethiopia, right? Any rate. Two. Okay, any rate. Looks like it's sidetracked on that. So basically, but in addition, the Egyptians relied on livestock. And so Moshe is giving a fair warning. If his livestock left outside, they're going to die. Verse 21. אשר לא שם ליבו אל דבר יהוה ויעזוב את עבדיו ואת מקנה בשדה. Any slaves, we're talking about humans there, any slaves and livestock that are left outside are going to die. Okay, and it's talking about the Egyptian slaves. Okay, and so then verse 21, anyone who doesn't listen to Yahweh is going to see that their slaves and their livestock die. Verse 22. ויאמר יהוה אל משה נטה את ידך על השמיים ויהי ברד בכל ארץ מצרים על האדם ועל הבהמה ועל כל עשב השדה בארץ מצרים. Paraphrase, Yahweh says to Moshe, stretch out your hand to the sky. Right, this is again the way Moshe he actuates or affects most of these plagues. He's taking his staff in his hand and he's stretching out, or sometimes Aaron is doing it, and he's stretching his hand out, and this is what brings on the plague. You don't want to see Moshe stretch his hand out. It's not a good sign. It's not good news, right? Good things are not coming. And there shall be hail throughout all the land of Egypt upon man, upon human beings, and upon animals, and upon kol esav hasadeh, and upon all the grains, or all the grasses of the field. And we'll talk about that more to Karaism, right? And we'll see that in a second. Verse 23, Moshe stretched out his staff upon towards the heavens. Yahweh natan kolot ubarad v'tihalef esh arza v'yamter Yahweh barad al eretz Mitzrayim. And Moshe stretched out his staff towards the heavens, and Yahweh natan kolot literally raised voices, but it's speaking about thunder. In other words, made it thunder. Ubarad and hail with halech esh arza, and fire fell towards the ground. Yamter Yahweh, and we'll talk about that in just a second. Yamter Yahweh barad al eretz Mitzrayim, and Yahweh rained down hail upon the land. Wahi barad. So this is not. We saw earlier, a couple of verses ago, that this is not hail like anything that has ever been seen before in Egypt, right? From its foundation, from the time it was founded, and here we get a description of exactly, what this hail was. So the hail came down, or there was hail. The hail came down, and there was fire burning inside the hail. Very, very heavy, a very heavy hail, a very heavy storm. Which there's never been anything like it in all of the land of Egypt from the time it became a nation. Okay, so this hail had actually fire, according to verse 24, had fire burning inside the hail. Okay. By the way, is this scientifically possible? I would say yes, it is. If one understands how hail is formed, when I did my aviating. When I got my private pilot's license, we learned a lot about the weather, and one of the things we learned about was hail. Because hail is one of the most dangerous things that can happen while you're flying a plane. Maybe ice is the only thing that's worse than it, but hail, basically, it's formed in thunderstorm clouds, and basically it's water that freezes, and then it falls, and then the updraft in the cloud sends it back up into the cloud, and then more water condenses around it, and this happens a bunch of times until more and more layers of water condense around the hail, and there might be dust in it as well that forms like the garin, the core of the hail, and then finally it's so heavy that it falls towards the ground. And if the hail is heavy enough, one could conceive that there's so much friction created that it might actually catch on fire in one way or another, right? Just the same way that, let's say, a meteorite or a meteor that's coming towards the Earth would actually be flaming, right? That's why we can see it, right? Because it's actually igniting. The friction is actually the meteor is not what's catching on fire, but it's the friction between the meteor and the air is causing the friction in the air surrounding it is causing the oxygen in the air to ignite. And the same thing could happen with hail. If the hail is extremely heavy, then you could get the same kind of phenomenon. As the hail comes down, that it's causing friction. It's causing a lot of friction because of its size and its weight with the surrounding air. And this could actually friction is the byproduct of friction is heat, right? That's why if you rub your hands like this, you're going to feel warmth, right? That's friction. Okay, so friction is basically lost energy that's converted into heat, and the same thing could happen with hail. It's not the hail per se that is catching on fire. It's going to be the air or hail that is, because of the friction, the oxygen might actually combust, right, due to the heat, and the oxygen might combust. That's a possibility. I don't know if there's ever been any actual instances of hail catching on fire. I wouldn't be completely shocked if there were talking about here. And I always like to point out that a lot of these things that are being spoken about in the plagues, they're not necessarily supernatural. Yes, they're brought on by Yahweh, but they might actually have a scientific basis, right? It's more like the timing, the intensity of it all that is supernatural, but the actual phenomena do not necessarily have to violate any laws, right? When the frogs came up out of the Nile River and covered the land of Egypt, right? Well, we can have frog infestations. I remember one time here in Portugal, I once went to a zoo and they had a turtle exhibit, and I looked at the turtle exhibit, and it was like this small pond surrounded by some trees, inside a cage, and it wasn't like 1 or 2 or 5 or 10 turtles. There were like hundreds of turtles, and I just looked at it and I said, "This is not a turtle exhibit. This is like a turtle infestation." I mean, there were turtles everywhere. They were like on the tree trunks, on the rocks, swimming in the water. I'd never seen anything like it. It was like a plague of turtles. Okay, so that's the point I always want to say, that the actual plagues are not necessarily violations. There's some, obviously, right? All of Egypt turned to blood. One could say that's a violation of all the waterways of Egypt turned to blood. But who knows? Maybe not. Maybe it was done by I remember when in Jerusalem, we used to go to this lake. We call it the Secher in Ein Karim. It was actually a lake that was created by a small dam that basically dammed up a valley. And at a certain point in the year, I think it was around April or May, the water would just turn blood red. It was disgusting. I mean, you'd look at it and you think the water was completely blood. And what was it? It was a certain type of bacteria, I think cyanobacteria, if I'm not mistaken, that were responsible for turning the water red. And after the dry season came, then eventually it would dry up and the water would turn back to normal color. So, it's possible that even something like the plague of blood, right, Hashem may not be bound by physics as we understand it. Absolutely. Agree with you on that one, Phil, but it's inconclusive. Okay, so I'm just giving another possibility. Where were we? Kabarad kol etz hasadeh shiber. So the hail broke kol etz hasadeh, all of the trees in the field, it broke them. Okay. Rak be'eretz Goshen asher sham b'nei Yisrael lo haya barad, and only in the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel were, was there no hail. Right. So again, we've seen this a number of times, that God makes a distinction between Egypt and the rest of Egypt and the land of Goshen, where the children of Israel are in the 10th plague, the slaying of the firstborn. Okay. So here we go in verse 27. Pharaoh sent and called for Moses, and Aharon and Aaron, and said to them, "Hatati apam, this time I am the sinner. I've sinned. I've done wrong. Yahweh tzaddik. Yahweh is righteous. And I and my people are the wrongdoers." Okay, literally the evil ones, but I think better translation would be the wrongdoers. So look at this. Remember, we just saw in Exodus chapter 5, verse 2. Pharaoh didn't even want to acknowledge the existence of Moshe's little imaginary friend in the sky, Yahweh. Right? Yeah, get out of here! I'd never heard of your stupid Yahweh friend, and I'm not letting Israel go. Be gone, peasant. Right? And now, what does Pharaoh say? Well, we've had quite a transformation here. Right? Pharaoh is changing his tune. Right? He says that I and my people have sinned, and Yahweh is the righteous one. Right? Well, that's quite a transformation, right? But this is the process we see. But still, as soon as the plagues relent, then of course Pharaoh goes back to his old games. Okay, verse 28. Atiru el Yahweh warav et mihot kolot Elohim ubarad ve'ashalacha etchem velo tosifu na'amod. So now, to paraphrase, Pharaoh asks Moshe to pray for him to Yahweh. So that's again, before he didn't even acknowledge the existence of Yahweh, and now he's asking Moshe to pray for him. Hatiru el Yahweh, entreat Yahweh, or pray to Yahweh. Rav miotohim, and because it's enough from these thunders caused by God, ubarad, and the hail. This time I'll send you. I will let you go, and you won't have to remain here anymore. and I'm paraphrasing. So now it seems like Pharaoh has finally learned his lesson, right? He's relenting. He's recognizing God. He's saying, recognizing Yahweh. He's saying Yahweh is the righteous one. Let Israel go. Okay, I'm going to let your people go. Okay. And Moshe says to Pharaoh, to him, when I leave the city, and again, what was I think we tried to look it up. What was the city capital of Egypt was at this time? I think it was Memphis. I guess ironic that Memphis has been in the news lately. I don't know if that's a coincidence, but I don't like to go in that direction. But I think the capital of Egypt was at this time was Memphis. At least that was the traditional capital of Egypt. Not Memphis, Tennessee, of course, but the original Memphis. When I leave the city, I'll stretch out my my palms. In other words, I'll go like this, right? El Yahweh, to Yahweh, stretch out my palms to the heavens. Akolot yachdalun, and the thunder will stop. The loud noises will stop. Abarad lo yeh od, and there will and the hail will not be any longer. Anteda ki le Yahweh haaretz, in order that you should know that the earth, the world belongs to Yahweh, that the earth belongs to Yahweh. Okay? So in other words, Moshe's going to make a big scene out of it. He's going to go, he's going to pray to God, the hail's going to stop, and that's going to be a sign, that's going to be a proof to not only to Israel, and not only to Pharaoh, and not only to Egypt, but ultimately to all the world, that Yahweh runs the world. Yahweh is the boss. Yahweh runs the show here. Okay, because what's the relevance here? Because Moshe is going to pray, Yahweh is going to respond, and the hail and the thunder are going to stop. So in other words, it's going to be clear that Yahweh is behind it. Okay, certainly not Moshe behind it, right? Moshe is giving all the glory to Yahweh. Kol hakavod, to Yahweh. Okay. Verse 32. Okay, so this is important. והחיטה והכוסמת לא נוקו כי oh, did I just skip a verse? I did skip the most important verse. Verse 30, I'm sorry. ואתה ועבדיך ידעתי כי טרם תראון מפני יהוה אלוהים. And you and your servants, okay, and I know, and you and your servants, I know that you will immediately stop fearing before Yahweh God. In other words, Moshe is saying, oh, okay, I'm going to do this up on the show, but I know you're not going to fear God. You're not going to fear Yahweh. Okay, verse 31. So here we come to a couple of verses which are very relevant to Karaism. I'm not going to get into it right now because we're going to get sidetracked for literally 1 or 2 hours if we do. But very briefly, I'll mention the relevance. Okay, and the flax. So this is speaking about the results of the hailstorm. Okay, so the flax and the seorah is barley. Nukata were destroyed. Why? Because the seorah, the barley, was in the state of aviv. Okay, aviv is translated separately as in the boot, or in the green stage, or there are various different ways to translate it. I'll get back to that word in a second. And the flax was budding. Okay. In other words, what this is trying to say is that the flax and the barley were already in an advanced enough stage of their ripeness, so that when the hail hit them, they were destroyed. They were already brittle enough so that they broke, right? It's like that old phrase, if you don't bend, you'll break. Okay, I'll get back to this in a second. Verse 32. And the wheat and the spelt were not destroyed. And again, this is usually translated as they were in Afelot literally means dark, but it implies dark green and implies that they were still in the grassy stage. Okay. Again, if we start talking about this, we're going to go down a whole rabbit hole that's going to take literally hours to get out of, right? We've spoken about this many times before as Karaites. We know how important this verse especially is because it mentions the word Aviv, and we know that it's in the month of the Aviv that God took us out of Egypt, and we know that we're supposed to celebrate. We're supposed to bring the Passover sacrifice and celebrate the festival of unleavened bread, also known as the Passover, right? Incorrectly known as the Passover holiday, but we're supposed to celebrate that in the month of the Aviv. And here we have this word Aviv, okay? Just for kicks and giggles, I want to get a couple of English translations on that. We're going to start with Robert Alter. So this is Exodus 9:31. And we'll speak a little bit about the importance and the relevance of this to Karaism per se, okay? And the history of Karaism, okay? But let's just check out Robert Alter. So we'll talk about Exodus 9. And we said that was verse 31. Okay. Let's see if I can highlight this in. There we go. Okay. So this is page 620. We might want to get a little Robert Alter commentary on that. .620. As long as we're at it, let's check out Everett Fox on that one. Shokin Bible, very, very good. I'll make an estimate of page 75. Not bad. Overshot the landing pad a little bit. Let's try 65. Let's try 70. So 9:31. Okay, so let's go with Everett Fox first. So he translates 9:31 through 9:32 as, now the flax and the barley were stricken, for the barley was in ears and the flax was in buds, but the wheat and the spelt were not stricken, for late ripening are they. Okay, literally we saw afelot, they were green, they were basically grass, still grass at that time. Okay, Robert Alter goes with, and the flax and the barley were struck, for the barley was in the bud and the flax was in the ear, but the wheat and the emmer were unripened. I like unripened is better, okay? But literally it means dark, and it means, again, dark green. It means they were in the grassy stage, okay? So we could speak an hour about what all of that means, but I'll just very briefly say that if you've ever seen wheat or barley or any of the seed grasses grow, then you know they start as grass, like your lawn. In fact, a lot of your lawn probably is actually from that same family, these wheat grasses, okay? So it'll look like grass originally, and then eventually it's going to spring a stalk, okay? And that stalk is going to spring ears, and then the ears are going to start filling up with the seeds, right? So basically, it goes from this very, almost like, not almost like this short grass, which you can imagine if it's just grass and barad, how do you say barad again in English? And hail hits it, it's not really going to destroy it because it's just grass. It's flexible, right? It could just regrow very easily. But if the grass is already in a stage where the stalk is sprung up and the ears have already started to appear on the stalks and they've already started to fill with the seed, if hail strikes it, it's going to break those stalks right off, and that's going to be the end of that plant for that year. In other words, it's not going to produce any more seeds for that year, right? It'll be destroyed before it's able to be harvested. Now, we also know that in the land of Israel, and I suppose everywhere, that there's a certain order to the way things grow. We know that first the barley shows up, and if you've ever lived in Israel, as I did for many years, then you know that the barley is going to be the first grass to grow, the first main grass to grow, I should say, in the springtime. And then about 2 months later, you're going to get the wheat and the other grasses that are associated with wheat, like semet, which is translated in modern Hebrew as spelt. Here, Robert Alter translates it in emmer, but it's basically varietals of wheat. Okay, so first the barley is going to come up, and then the wheat is going to come up, right? And the pishta, the flax, is going to come up around the same time as the barley. In fact, you could see wild flax growing all over the land of Israel in the springtime, and they have these beautiful flowers which smell absolutely spectacular. and then later on you'll see the wheat come up. So first the barley comes up, ripens, and then the wheat starts coming up as the barley is ripening, and that's exactly what we see here. So the wheat and the similar varietals of wheat were at too early a stage. They were afelot. They were in the literally they were dark. Implies dark green, and that really implies that they were unripe, as Robert Alter translates it as. Okay, so the wheat and the other wheat varietals at this point were in too early a stage to be affected by the hail. They were not destroyed by the hail. But the barley, which comes up earlier, the se'orah, okay, and why is barley called se'orah in Hebrew? It comes from the word se'ar, which means hair, and we all know, as if we've seen barley plants, that they have these little, it looks like hairs coming out where the seeds are, right? So literally, se'orah means you could call it hairy wheat or something like that. Okay, that's the origin of the word se'orah. So the barley and the flax, which come up earlier, were already in a stage where they had already sprung up their stalks. They were already beginning to develop their seeds, and so when the hail came, it destroyed them. Okay, and the Bible says they were in the state of Aviv. Okay, we know that this is the month. In the month of the Aviv is when the Israelites were taken out of Egypt. In the month of the Aviv is when the children of Israel to bring the Passover sacrifice. In the month of the Aviv is when we're to celebrate the 7 days of the festival of unleavened bread, of Hakham Melech, also called the Passover holiday. Right? This all takes place explicitly in the month of the Aviv. That's what the Torah says. Okay, so this word Aviv, which is a bit mysterious, is important to know because we have to determine when the month of the Aviv is, and therefore Karaites in the springtime, we go out, we look for the barley to determine when is in other words, when it's in a state where it's already starting to seed, and in a state where hail would be able to destroy the barley. And when we find that, we declare that the month of the Aviv, and that becomes the first month of the new year, which we'll get to a little bit later in Exodus chapter 12. Okay? That's to make a very, very long story very, very short. And just to finish off that little topic, I'm going to see if Robert Alter has any commentary on that. Chapter 9 notes. And then we can get into a whole, we could speak hours now about how this relates to the biblical calendar, how the biblical calendar is a luni solar calendar. It stays in sync with the cycles of the moon, but it also stays in sync with the cycles of the sun, unlike, for instance, the Islamic calendar, which is a purely lunar calendar. Okay, the Islamic calendar stays in sync with the cycles of the moon, but it does not stay in sync with the cycles of the sun. That's why the holiday of Ramadan changes from year to year. It falls back approximately 11 days, not approximately, exactly 11 days, no, approximately, because it depends if it's a leap year, 11 days each year from what it was before. And I remember when I went to, the first time I visited Morocco in 2013, it was in July of 2013, and it was Ramadan. And now, the last time I visited Morocco, which was in 2018, Ramadan was already back to, if I remember correctly, it had been in May or something like that. And it's just going to keep on falling back around the calendar until it makes an entire cycle. That does not happen with the biblical calendar, with the Hebrew calendar, because it's kept in check with the seasons of the sun. And the way it's done is by determining when the barley is in a state of Aviv. When the barley is budding, that becomes the new month. So basically the biblical calendar, the calendar of the Old Testament, the calendar of the Torah, regulates itself according to the moon by looking for the crescent new moon, which we just saw about a week ago, and also by staying in sync with the sun by checking each year when the barley is ripening and declaring that as the first month of the new year. So the biblical calendar, the original biblical calendar, is a self-intercalating calendar. Intercalation is a fancy way of saying leap years. Okay, or adding a leap month in this case, right? So the biblical calendar will self-intercalate. It will not start a new year until the barley is ripe, and this happens each year. So what happens is that months get added on, tacked on to the end of the previous year if the barley is not ripe, and that prevents the calendar from doing as the Islamic calendar does, from shifting around the entire year. And basically keeps the holidays in sync with the seasons. That's a mouthful to swallow. If you didn't get all of that, oh, here's Bruce. Bruce?
Yes, hi.
Hey, how you doing?
Okay, and you?
Doing okay. Were you able to hear the study, or you're just able to?
No, I just came on board a few minutes ago.
Okay. All right. We were just talking about the Aviv.
Right, I heard.
Oh, okay. So we have the Aviv search coming up soon, Bruce.
Right. Right.
So we're going to have to talk about that. At any rate,
right.
Yeah. So, yep. So that's in a nutshell. Again, I was talking about how the Hebrew calendar, the Torah calendar, the biblical calendar is what's happening here? Is a lunisolar calendar, as opposed to, for instance, the Islamic calendar, which is a purely lunar calendar, as opposed to, let's say, the Western calendar, the Gregorian calendar, which is a purely solar calendar, right? The Gregorian calendar, the calendar that we use in the West, January, February, March, April 22nd, whatever, July 13th, it doesn't make any attempt to stay synced with the phases of the moon, right? If I tell you July 13th, 2023, you'll have no idea just by hearing that what the phase of the moon will be on that day, okay? But you will know what season it's in. It will always be in the summertime, okay? If I tell you in the Islamic calendar that Ramadan it starts in another month, you'll have no idea just from that information. Well, you will, because if I tell you Ramadan starts, if I ask you what day Ramadan starts in the year 2027, you'll have no idea without looking it up, because it doesn't make Ramadan because the Islamic calendar is a purely lunar calendar and makes no attempt to stay synced with the seasons, with the movement of the Earth around the sun. Okay. However, the Israelite calendar is a lunisolar calendar. If I tell you the 15th day of the first month, you'll know exactly what the phase of the moon is, and you'll know exactly. Okay, it will mean that the 15th day of the month means that basically you'll have a full moon. So it might be exactly full, but it's basically going to be a full moon. And the season is always going to be in the springtime. There are other lunisolar calendars, by the way, as well, such as the Chinese calendar is maybe a famous example. The Chinese calendar is a lunisolar calendar. The ancient Israelite calendar is not the only lunisolar calendar in the world. Okay. However, it's one of the few, if not the only one that I could think of, the only important one that determines the solar year, not by calculation, but by observation of ripeness of, in this case, the barley. Okay, so much more to be said about this. We'll get sidetracked literally for hours if I do, so I'm going to move on. Bruce, anything you want to add?
Well, you know that maybe my life's mission is to tell about the Aviv. According to the prophetess Mishaya, if you remember her, the barley princess.
Yes, your friend Mishaya, who I met in 2019. I remember her. Are you going to sing us a song about the Aviv or about the maiden moon?
I didn't prepare it. I'm not prepared.
All right. Another time.
If I can find the words. Yeah, another time.
Okay. By the way, Bruce, I have a very quick question for you, which has nothing to do with Torah study, but you're still back in your place, right? Didn't you tell me before you went to the United States that you were going to have to leave? I don't know what happened to Bruce. Hello? Bruce? Okay, we'll move on. Hello? Okay. I don't know what happened to Bruce. I guess we'll be back on, Canby. I just want to make sure it's not a problem here. I want to do a sound check. Can you guys all hear me?
Oh, you disappeared for a while. I just heard that.
Okay, yeah, sometimes
hear me.
Okay, sometimes the internet is a little bit iffy here. So I just wanted to ask you, you're still in your same place, right? In Parodad, because I thought you had I thought they were gonna knock it down and build condos there or something like that.
They're still planning on doing that, yes.
Okay, but for now you're able to stay there?
Yeah, but they don't give me a timetable. I have no idea how long my existence here will remain.
Do they have an obligation to give you a certain amount of notice before they throw you out of there?
Probably they need to.
Or they could just come one day and say, could they just come one day and say, bulldozers are coming tomorrow, you have to get out today?
You know what? I don't know. I'll ask a lawyer to check that out for me. Because
you better find out.
I'm living in this situation where I don't know when the sword of Damocles is going to fall over my head.
That's
it's really very unnerving.
Maybe you should, well, we could discuss this privately. Maybe you should be proactive and already be looking for another place so you don't have to live like this.
Yeah, that's also true. Right. The last thing in the world that I need to do right now, but.
Well, yeah, I hear you. Well, since it is Israel, I'm sure they'll give you at least 1 hour notice.
Something like that. I have to check with a lawyer what kind of notice they're obligated to give me.
Yeah, I hear you. All right, man. Well, keep me updated on that. All right, we're gonna go on here. So, verse 33. So we're talking about the plague of hail. ויצא משה מעם פרעה את העיר ויפרוש כפיו אל יחווה ויחדלו הקולות והברד מהמטר לא ניתן ארצה. So basically, Moshe went out, he stretched his hands, and the hail stopped. Verse 34. וירא פרעה כי חדל המטר והברד והקולות ויוסף לחטוא ויקפד ליבו הוא בעבדיו. So remember, when he had the hail, when Moshe came to him during the hailstorm, what did he say? He said he made this nice, big, highfalutin statement, right? This grandiose proclamation. Pharaoh called to Moshe and Aaron and said to them, I have sinned this time. I am wrong this time. Yahweh is the righteous one, and I and my people are the wrongdoers, or the evil ones. And now, as soon as the hail stopped, what does he say? Okay, where were we? Verse 34. Pharaoh saw that the precipitation or the rain and the hail had stopped, and the thunder and the rain and the hail had stopped. Yosef lachto, and he returned to doing wrong, to sinning. Yachbed libo hu ve'avadav, and he hardened. I'm sorry, I should be because there's a number of different verbs that are used here. Literally, he made his heart heavy from the word kaved. He made his heart heavy. He and his servants. Okay, so basically, Pharaoh went right back to his old ways. Okay, we spoke last week about how this is related to the concept of a neder, of a swear in the Torah. I don't want to rehash that. You can look at last week's Torah study. We went into it in more detail. But basically, the idea of a neder is you're in dire straits, right? I don't want to use any horrible, analogies. But let's say you found out that the IRS is going to investigate you, or something like that, and you say to God, you make a swear to God, and you say, "Oh God, I swear that if the IRS doesn't find anything wrong with my taxes, if the audit comes out favorably, I'll donate $500 to charity." And then the audit, and you swear up and down, and you're really worried, and then the auditor comes and says, "Oh, everything's good, no problem. We're not going to fine you anything." And then all of a sudden you're like, $500. I really need this $500. Did I really promise it? You almost like gaslight yourself, Did I really promise it? Do I really have to pay it? You're out of the problem, and all of a sudden you forget all the promises you made. And this is spoken about explicitly in the Torah, so much so that the Torah explicitly says it is better not to make a swear at all, rather than to make a swear and then not to fulfill what you've sworn. Okay, it's the same thing here. Pharaoh is in dire straits. His people are being destroyed. His nation is being destroyed by the hail, and he makes a swear. He makes his grandiose proclamation about he's the evil one and Yahweh is the righteous one, and he's going to let Israel go. and as soon as the hail disappears, he forgets it all and goes right back to his old game. He's broken his vows many, many times, right? So much that in the end, and each time it's getting worse and worse, right? The plagues are getting worse and worse. So much so that it's just in the end, well, we know what happens in the end. Okay, all right. Now we go to Exodus 10. Exodus 10 is actually the beginning of our parsha, so let's go for it. Okay, that was all review, but it happens sometimes that I get I have so much to say that the review takes out longer than what I hope. All right, Exodus chapter 10. Wayomer Yahweh el Moshe. By the way, if anybody else would like to read the Hebrew, such as Bruce or anyone else, please let me know. More than welcome to. And anybody has any questions, comments, I really like these studies to be interactive. I think it increases the amount that everybody learns. Okay, and I certainly don't and never will claim to know everything. So anytime anyone gives a comment or asks a question or gives their own opinion, it always teaches me. Right? We're all here on this earth, human beings trying to learn about the ways of God. And anyone who claims to know everything or know it all is either deluding themselves or just a narcissist or a liar or something along those lines. So please ask questions, add comments, anything you want to say. Please chime in. Okay. Chapter 10, verse 1. Yomer Yahweh el Moshe Bo, and this is the name of this week. Parsha Bo. Bo el Paro ki ani ichpati et libo. So Yahweh says to Moshe, come to Pharaoh because I have made his heart heavy. And last week we spoke about, I do not claim to be an Egyptologist in any way, shape, or form, but I know it has been pointed out by many expert Egyptologists that this idea of, so literally it says, I've made his heart heavy. And many Egyptologists have pointed out that the idea of a heavy heart, written in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, that the ancient Egyptians believed that when you die, your heart was weighed on the scales against the feather, and if your heart was heavier than a feather, then basically it's not good. You get eaten by some god. Okay, basically eternal damnation in a nutshell, right? So many Egyptologists have pointed out that this phraseology of "I've made Pharaoh's heart heavy" is a reference to that idea. Okay, that Pharaoh's heart being heavy means that when he gets to this, not that the Torah believes it, but that the Egyptians would have believed that if Pharaoh's heart was heavy, that when he gets to when he dies, that his heart will fail. Will weigh in heavier than the feather, and that will be the end of him. Okay, but lev avadav, and the hearts of his servants. So, by the way, we always say that, we always like to point out that it was Pharaoh's heart that was hardened or strengthened or made heavy, not strengthened, but calcified or made heavy. And it's also not just his heart, but it lev avadav, also the hearts of his servants, of his assistants. Okay, in order that I should place my signs, or these signs of mine, in his midst, in his lap. Okay, so we've seen this theme many times before. That one of the reasons, perhaps the main reason, that God is making Pharaoh's heart. Is making Pharaoh stubborn, that he won't give in, is so that Pharaoh can so that God can make many signs, and therefore his actions in Egypt seem great to all of the world. It's a way of showing the entire world how great God is.
Okay, before you go
He's
on,
doing his own thing. Yeah.
Before you continue, you know that God is there with Pharaoh. How do I know? Because he says,
I got
come.
you. I know what you're going to say.
He doesn't say go to Pharaoh. He says, come to Pharaoh.
Yeah, but I've heard, this week I've been listening to a bunch of different divrei Torah from a bunch of different rabbis, and they all like to point that out, that bo means come rather than go, but it really doesn't necessarily mean come per se. It means go into. Okay, and I'll give you proof that in the Tanakh we see many times it speaks about the sun. Okay, it says the shemesh yotzei v'shemesh ba. Okay, the shemesh yotzei is shemesh ba. The sun goes out. That means the sun rises, and the sun comes in. The sun sets. Okay, and the typical phrase for sunset or for the sun setting in the Tanakh is shemesh ba. The sun comes. Okay, so from our perspective, it's not coming, right? It's going, right? It's going away from the sky, right? But it really means goes into. Okay. In fact, I'm just curious to see if maybe it even gives that specific translation in the BDB here. Here, go in. Right? We even get in the Strong's. Strong's is saying it. Strong's is usually copying the BDB, and the BDB is saying here, come in, come, go in. Okay. So it's incorrect, and so many rabbinical divrei Torah are based on this idea of what you were saying, Bruce. Not to say not to say that you're wrong for saying it. It's just it's not the meaning that's implied here. Okay, the meaning that's implied here is go in. Okay, it's not as if like the rabbis would like to do, where they over literalize. Right, the rabbis are constantly accusing us Karaites of over literalizing, of being too literal with the words of the Torah, but it's really the rabbis who again and again and again and again are too literal with the Torah. And this is a classic not a classic example, but this is an example in this week's parsha of how they're being too literal. It doesn't mean come in. It doesn't mean come. It means go into. It can be from the perspective of seeing the thing go away, just as when the sun sets, we see it go away, and yet the Torah says the sun comes. Okay?
No, but no, I
So
don't. I don't see it that way. I don't see it that way at all, because it's so easy to say lech leFaro.
Right, but Pharaoh is sitting inside his throne room, right? So you're not just going out; you're coming into his throne room. You're going into his throne room. In other words, the word "bo" in this case means it implies going into a place. Just when the sun sets, it goes down below the horizon. Okay,
I don't know.
That's my opinion. Okay,
I don't know. I'm not with you.
All right. All right.
All right.
Well,
continue.
The only thing I would say, Bruce, is that we have to be careful as not to over literalize, as the rabbis tend to do, and tend to, ironically, I guess you can call it projection, right? People often with behavioral disorders or mental illness, they'll always project that which they say about others. They are the perpetrators of that. So the rabbis are always accusing the Karaites of over literalizing. But since the rabbinical movement is really the movement that is a movement of insanity and mental illness, they're really the ones who over literalize. Classic example being tefillin, okay, which is never implied anywhere. Great, that's here. And every rabbi that I heard this week, I listened to a bunch of divrei Torah from rabbinical sources, said the same stupid thing. I'm sorry, I shouldn't say stupid because that's insulting you. But said the same thing about bo, then it means come in, and they all had their weird divrei Torah based on it. But it's over literalization, in my opinion. All right, that's my opinion. Let's leave it at that. Verse 2. Ulema'an tsaper be'aznai bincha ben bincha et asher hittalalti b'Mitzrayim et otatai asher samti bam v'yadatem ki ani Yahweh. So this is again of increasing, of making lots of plagues, right? Not just one plague, right? God could have finished them all off right away, but he increased the number of plagues, and we're getting explanations why. Okay, in order that you, now speaking to Israel, should say, or should tell into the ears of your son and the son of your grandson, that which I did in Egypt, and the signs which I placed upon them, or which I made upon them, and so that you should know that I am Yahweh, that I am God. Okay, so all of the reason, explicitly the reason that Pharaoh's heart is being hardened, made obstinate, made heavy, is in order that God can make a huge show an unforgettable, finale, an unforgettable show, so that we know that the entire world knows who Yahweh is, and so that we Israelites can tell our children and our children's children each year about these actions. This great show that we'll call a show, but this great thing that God did in Egypt. Okay, Yavo Moshe Aaron el Paro, and here I would say this is proof that, again, we have Yavo, and Moshe and Aaron came to Pharaoh. It doesn't say they went to Pharaoh; they came to Pharaoh, right? So it doesn't. This is clearly not speaking about God. This is speaking about Moshe and Aaron. So they went into Pharaoh, right? They didn't come to Pharaoh, because we're not speaking about it from Pharaoh's perspective, right? We're speaking about it from Moshe and Aaron's perspective. And here we have the same word, Yavo. Okay? Okay. Yomru, Elau ko amar Yahweh, Elohei Ivrim. And they said to him, so Moshe and Aaron said to Pharaoh, so says Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, Ad matai me'anta le'anot mipanai, shalach ami v'yavduni. So says Yahweh, the God of the Hebrews, how long will you refuse to concede to my wishes? I'll translate it as Shalach ami v'yavduni. Let my people go so that they may serve me, so that they may worship me. Verse 4, Ki im ma'en ata mishalech et ami hineni mevi mahar arbe b'gvulecha. Because if you refuse, there's a lot of background noise. You can unmute yourself if you need to say something. Okay. So, because if you refuse to let my people go, I'm going to bring upon you arbe. What is arbe? Locusts. Bigvulecha. Okay, it's going to be an attack of the locusts, a locust storm. Okay. וכיסה את עין הארץ, ולא יוכל לראות את הארץ, ואכל את יתר הפליטה הנשארת לכם מן הברד, ואכל את כל העץ צומח לכם מן השדה. So, verse 5, translation, kisata is gonna, literally it says he's gonna cover the eye of the land, but what it really means is it's gonna cover up the view of the land. In other words, you won't be able to do anything. And you will not be able to see the land. You will not be able to see anything. And they will eat, and the locusts will eat yetera pleta, literally the remainder of the survivors. Okay, so what is it talking about? We saw in the previous chapter in Exodus 9 that the barley and the flax were destroyed, but the wheat and the wheat and the spelt were spared. Well, now the locusts are going to come. Okay, if you don't let my people go, now the locusts are going to come and they're going to eat the wheat and the spelt. They're going to eat all the rest of the stuff as well, right? Because it doesn't matter. They'll eat the locusts will devour the grasses as well, right? The hail spared the later ripening grasses such as the wheat and the spelt. Because they were still in the grass stage, but the locusts will not be so kind. They're gonna sweep up, they're gonna vacuum up whatever the hail didn't take care of, basically is what it's saying. Okay? And they will eat all of the trees growing, or perhaps the plants growing from the field. Okay? So basically, the locusts are gonna take whatever was left over from the hail. Verse 6. Umalu batecha ובתי כל עבדיך ובתי כל מצרים אשר לא ראו אבותיך ואבות אבותיך מיום היותם עד על האדמה עד היום הזה ויפן ויצא עם פרעה. And מלאו בתיך ובתי כל עבדיך, and they will fill up your houses and the houses of all your servants. Again, it's not just Pharaoh's house, always his servants as well, right? Not only Pharaoh's heart was hardened, but also his servants' heart were hardened. Here, it's not only but they call Mitzrayim and the houses of all of Egypt. Basically, to paraphrase, it's going to be a locust plague like your ancestors have never seen since Egypt became a nation, since Egypt was founded. Okay, literally from the day that they appear on the earth. Okay, in other words, as long as Egypt has been around, as long as your ancestors can remember, this is going to be a locust plague like none of them have ever seen. This is going to be something, magnitudes of order more severe than previous locust plagues that you've ever experienced. Okay, and they turned away and left from Pharaoh, and here we have Yitzeh. Okay, so remember, Bruce, this is for you. Yitzeh, they went out from Pharaoh. Yitzeh is the opposite of Ba. Okay, remember we said when the sun comes out in the morning, when the sun rises, the Torah says Shemesh Yitzeh. That's it. And we have the word Yitzeh here. And when the sun goes in at night, when the sun sets, we have the Shemesh Ba. Okay, so here we know that from that and from here we know that Yitzeh is the opposite of Ba. Okay, go in is the opposite of go out. Okay, and that again fortifies the translation of bo, not as come, but as go into, because here we have the opposite, they went out of. Okay, all right, verse 7. ויאמרו עבדי פרעה אליו עד מתי יהיה זה לנו למוקש שלח את האנשים ויעבדו את יהוה אלוהיהם הטרם תדע כי עבדה מצרים. So this is a question, right? So now, verse 7, ויאמרו עבדי פרעה, and the servants of Pharaoh said to him, Ad matai, until when? Will these people, okay, it says literally this, but it implies really, I think, the people of Israel, or perhaps Moshe and Aaron specifically, until when will this be a snare for us? And this will be a trap for us, okay? Shalachet anashim, let these people go, v'yavdu et Yahweh Elohim, and let them worship their Yahweh, their God. Haterem tedaki adam Mitzrayim, do you not yet realize that Mitzrayim has been destroyed, that Mitzrayim is a lost cause? So these are the Avdei Pharaoh, the very same servants that it keeps on saying that their hearts were hardened, their houses are going to be filled with the locusts, etc. So at least the servants, even though their hearts are being hardened, not as hard as Pharaoh's heart, at least they have the common sense to tell Pharaoh, listen, man, this is enough, okay? This has gone too far, and just let these people go already. But you can't. For Pharaoh to let the people of Israel go requires something that thing is to admit that Yahweh is God and he is not God. He and his false gods, of which again the pharaohs of Egypt believed that they were God incarnate. Okay, that he would have to admit that he is not God incarnate, and that his false gods, the gods of Egypt, the pantheon of Egypt, is a bunch of BS. Either they don't exist at all, or they're weaker in their eyes than this God Yahweh, and he just cannot do that. This is pride. Okay, his pride is what's causing his heart to be hardened, and what is causing his downfall. Okay, we saw in in Proverbs, what was it, 8:6 or 18:16? I don't remember chapter and verse at this point, but we saw Lifnei Shever Gaon, right before a fall, there is pride, and that's exactly what's happening here. Pharaoh is so stuck on the idea that he's the boss. He's still trying to prove that he's the boss, even though his entire world is falling apart behind him, around him, I should say. Okay, he cannot admit it, even though all the evidence is showing he ain't the boss and Yahweh is the boss. He cannot bring himself to admit it, because it's like he's staked his entire reputation, his entire life has been staked on these false philosophies. What would be an example? Oh, someone who has done research and has come to a certain conclusion, and they've gone on TV shows and they've gone on newscasts and they've said, I am 100% sure that my research is correct. And then as more and more research out, proving that they're real, but they've taken they're famous on their research, and even though there's more and more evidence that their research is incorrect, they'll still stick to their belief in their research, eventually lead to their complete, we won't say destruction, but their downfall, right? Their fall becomes more and more clear that their research is incorrect. That's exactly what's happening here, and unfortunately, I have a certain person in mind, but I won't go into any more details. Okay, but what's happening here is exactly the same thing. Okay, Pharaoh has staked his entire life on this idea of Egyptian culture is the best. The Egyptian pantheon is the true gods. That Pharaoh himself is a god, as we know the ancient Egyptians believed. That the sun god Ra is the truth of the pantheon. That the Israelites are nothing; they're just a bunch of slaves. Their only purpose, they can be completely ignored. Their false imaginary friend in the sky, Yahweh, is just a figment of their imagination. That Egyptian culture is superior to biblical culture, to Israelite culture. Sound like the United States of America, even though the United States of America's empire and the country is crumbling around it due to the false philosophies that it is adopted. It is so arrogant and is so stuck in its ways that it can't even see that is the case, right? So it's always the same thing. Lifnei shever gaon. Before a fall, there is pride. Okay, Pharaoh cannot, will not, is incapable of admitting that he's wrong, because if he admits that he's wrong, then his entire worldview, it's not just he's admitting he's wrong, he's admitting his entire worldview, his entire nation, all of the philosophy, all of the ideas, all of the structures and the belief systems of his nation are wrong. Not do that. He will stand, he will, what's the expression? This is his Alamo? Is that the expression? No. This is the hill he's going to die on, and die he will. Okay. Any questions? Any comments? Let's go on to verse 10. وَيَوْمَرْ عَلَيْهِمْ إِيخَيْنْ يَحْوَيْ أَمَخَيْمْ كَشَاءَ شَلَيْخَتْهِمْ وَإِتَّبْخِمْ الرَّؤُوكِ رَعَى نَجِدْ فَنِخِمْ. I skipped the verse. Hold on a second. A couple of verses. Where were we? Verse 8 we're up to. Aaron and Paro. Remember, Moshe and Aaron told Pharaoh there's going to be locusts, and then they left. Excuse me for 1 second. I've got to take a 1 second break here. Just want to turn this off and turn the other heater off because the thingy stopped. I don't want to waste this. Sorry about that. Okay, so they left, right? They didn't even wait around. They weren't thrown out by Pharaoh. They just told Pharaoh, hey, you're getting locusts, pal. And where was it? They turned around and left. They just turned around and they walked away, right? They ditched him. Okay? So then they were brought Moshe, right? Aaron. Okay, they were brought back into Pharaoh, right? Pharaoh has something he wants to say. Yomer Lehem, and what did he say to them? Lechu, ifdu et Yahweh Elohim Ami Hakhim. Go and worship Yahweh your God. By the way, who's exactly is going to be going? Pharaoh wants to know who's going out into the desert, right? Remember, the original request of Moshe and Aaron was, let my people go. He didn't even ask permanently. So let us go out into the desert to worship our God Yahweh, hold a 3-day feast for our God Yahweh. And Pharaoh said, get out of my face. Okay? Yes, Marianne, you have a question. Go for it. Type it in or however you want to do it. I guess. Scripture. I'm waiting for your question. I don't know what the question is. So this scripture is not credible. You quoted from the Greek scriptures, not the Tanakh. Oh, so you're asking me. Okay. So okay, World War III, basically rebuking you for quoting from the New Testament, and you're asking me, is the New Testament credible. This question? I'm going to assume that's your question. So again, we here are not Christians. We are not believers in Jesus or Yeshua or anything along those lines. I know you are, Marianne, and that's fine. Okay. And I know how much it's had an influence in your life. Okay. So I'm not even going to go in the direction of trying to get into a theological or philosophical argument about that. Okay. But if you ask my opinion, there is only one God, and his name is Yahweh, or Jehovah, or Yahweh, or whatever you want to call him. I'm going by Yahweh at this point, and that is the only God. There is no other God. There's no Son of God. There's no daughter of God. There's no Holy Ghost. There's no sun God like Ra. There's no Baal, etc. And are on your path, and that's fine. I respect and honor your path, and I know how important it is to you. But for me, and that's Yahweh. So I'm not a believer in Jesus / Yeshua, the Son of God, and so that is why World War III is mentioning to you, or is saying to you, that it's Greek scripture rather than Hebrew scripture. So to clarify, so the New Testament, in my opinion, it's not divine. It's basically it's a lot of things, but it's the main books are accounts by some of the disciples of this person, Jesus / Yeshua, who wrote down their remembrances and impressions of him, and it's not prophecy or divinely or divinely sourced, as would be the case of the books we're reading right now. I'm just at that, okay? But it doesn't matter. It's important for us to go down that road at all, because as a believing Christian, which you are at this point, then of course Christianity or Christians accept the Old Testament. Yes, they believe that the law the law as put down in the Old Testament no longer applies, but that's not even really true as well, because the 10 Commandments, do not murder. Certainly Christians do not believe it's okay to murder. So, but at least they claim that the Old Testament, the laws of the Old Testament are irrelevant at this point in time. I don't think they are. I think they are extremely relevant, and we've spoken a lot about their relevance, right? We saw how mistakes that the ancient Canaanites, the ancient Egyptians committed are being committed by the West today. So nothing has changed, nothing is new under the sun, right? Ecclesiastes chapter 1 verse 9, and so I think the laws and the ways of the Old Testament of the Torah are extremely relevant in this day and age. But yeah, that's what I have to say on that topic. All right, we're going to move on here. So Pharaoh wants to know who's going exactly. So Pharaoh's now he's going to start negotiations. Okay. I never read Donald Trump's The Art of the Deal, but I do remember hearing one thing, which is that you should never negotiate from a position of weakness. But the fact of the matter is, Pharaoh is going to start these negotiations very much from a position of weakness. Okay, he's already been slammed by 8 plagues. His nation is in shambles. Okay, it's about to be more in shambles, and now he's going to start negotiations. Not a good idea. Okay, so what's his negotiation? He wants to know who exactly is going. Verse 9. We're in Exodus chapter 10, verse 9. ויאמר משה בנערינו ובזקנינו נלך בבנינו ובנותינו ובצאנינו ובבקרינו נלך כי חג יהוה לנו. And Moshe says, basically, to make a long story short, we're all going. The whole mishpacha, the whole bunch is going. Okay, b'na'arenu, our youth, our young, ubizaknenu, and our old, we will go. B'banenu v'notenu, our sons and our daughters, this meaning our men and our women, were going to go. Our flocks and our cattle are going to go. Our sheep/goats and our cows are going to go. Because it is a festival, literally a pilgrimage festival to Yahweh, right? We all have to go because we all have to go up to a pilgrimage festival out in the desert to worship our God Yahweh. So basically, Moshe is basically saying, we're not there's no negotiations here. We're all going. Okay, verse 10. ויאמר עליהם, יהי כן יהוה עמכם, כאשר אשלח אתכם ואתכם ראו כי רעה נגד פניכם. And he said to them, so Pharaoh said to them, may Yahweh be with you. First of all, he's kind of, again, invoking Yahweh, right? So he's recognizing for this moment the existence of Yahweh when he's threatened by another plague. כאשר אשלח אתכם ואתכם ראו כי רעה נגד פניכם. And he's saying, if I let you go and also your children, literally translates as behold or see that there is evil in front of your eyes. In other words, you're plotting something. Okay? You have a devious plot here. Okay, something that doesn't make sense. Why do you need to bring the children? Okay, the children have nothing to do. Children don't bring sacrifices. Okay, they're just children. So why do you need to bring the children, right? And also by implication, he's also talking about we'll go ahead one verse and then we'll go revisit that. Verse 11. And he says, no. Okay, you, just the males, just the adult males should go. Okay, he's basically saying you don't need to bring the women and children. Okay, you're up to something. If you're telling me you're bringing the women and children, then you're lying to me, okay? Because in order to sacrifice to your God, all you need is the males, right? In the Torah, and well, I guess women do bring sacrifices, but generally when worship is done, it's done by the adult males, okay? The women and the children stay at home. The women stay home and they're tending to the children, to the babies, right? It's the men who go out and do these communal sacrifices. Not always the case, okay? But we can, for instance, in the pilgrimage festivals. So the Torah has 3 pilgrimage festivals: Passover, Festival of Unleavened Bread, Shavuot, translated as the Festival of Weeks, and Sukkot, translated as the Festival of Tabernacles. And there, those pilgrimage festivals, it says that Kol Zechurcha, okay, Yira'et Kol Zechurcha, all of your males should be seen. In other words, it's a pilgrimage festivals. The male adults are the ones who are supposed to come up to Jerusalem, or to the place that is eventually chosen as Jerusalem, for the pilgrimage festivals. The women are not required to go, and the children are not required to go. Okay? So that's exactly what Pharaoh is saying here. Pharaoh is saying, you're up to something. Okay? If you're telling me that the women and the children are going to go, and also the animals, then you're not just going out to the desert for 3 days and then coming back. Okay, you are planning to escape. You're planning to get out of here. And remember, if we go all the way back to the beginning, Exodus chapter 4, no, even before that, probably Exodus chapter 1 or 2, Pharaoh's main concern was that the Israelites, why did he enslave them? It's chapter 1. He says why he's enslaving them, because he's worrying that they're growing so great in number that eventually they're going to leave the land, and they're going to join up with Egypt's enemies. So he says we've got to deal wisely with these people. Let's get smart with these people. Okay, let's wise up to these people, right? To the threat that these people create, and let's enslave them, right? So Pharaoh's main worry is that the Israelites are going to leave Egypt entirely, join up with the enemies, and he's going to lose control over them. He's not going to have them as servants. I guess his secondary concern, but I guess his main concern is that they're going to join up with his enemies and they're going to come back and attack Egypt, right? He doesn't want them to go. Okay, so now basically he's basically calling out Moshe for what he perceives as their BS. Okay, and he's saying to them, if you're planning to bring the women and the children and the animals, then you're not just planning to go out in the desert for 3 days. Okay, you're planning to do what I thought you were from the from the very beginning. By the way, this is not the same Pharaoh because that Pharaoh died. This is now the next Pharaoh, okay? Because we know that when Moshe ran away to Midian, he was called back because it was said that Pharaoh had already died, right? So this is ostensibly his son or something like that. You could read. There's a million videos on YouTube. There's a million articles which Pharaoh it was, and we're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But you could spend the next 10 days watching different lectures on what this scholar believes was the Pharaoh of the Exodus, and that scholar believes was the Pharaoh of the Exodus, and when it took place, and was it the Hyksos? Was it the Hyksos dynasty, or was it not the Hyksos dynasty? The Hyksos were, so Egypt was temporarily taken over, I think, for a period of around 200 years, if I'm not mistaken, by the Hyksos dynasty, which were Canaanites that had come down into the land of Egypt and had basically taken over the leadership of Egypt, and then eventually they were the original. They were defeated, and then the original Egyptians Egyptians regained control of Egypt. Anyway, like I said, there's plenty of stuff out there on YouTube and various journal articles, and you can spend the next 5 weeks trying to find out which Pharaoh it was. But the point is, what was the point? I forgot what the point was. Oh, back to the verse. So basically, Pharaoh is saying, "No way, man. Okay, Moshe, no, you're up to something. Okay, you're lying to me. Okay, the only ones who can go are the adult males, because you told me you want to go and worship God. You want to worship your God Yahweh. Then all you need are the adult males. Okay, all right." Shalom, Yirma. Shalom. Welcome. So nice to see you. Welcome. Okay, verse 12. So we are in Exodus chapter 10, verse 12. Wayomer Yahweh el Moshe neteyatcha al eretz Mitzrayim. So here comes another plague. Ve'arbeh ya'al al eretz Mitzrayim yochal et kol esef haaretz et kol asher ishir ha'barad. So Yahweh said to Moshe, "Stretch out your hand upon the land of Egypt." Ve'arbeh, regarding or towards, you could say towards the locusts, or regarding the locusts. Ya'al al eretz Mitzrayim, and they shall come up upon the land of Egypt. Yochal et kol esef haaretz, and they shall eat up all of the grass of the land. Et kol asher hishir ha'barad, everything and everything that the hail left behind. So that's it. Now we're up to the next plague, the 8th plague, locusts. Verse 13, Vayet Moshe et Matehu al eretz Mitzrayim, Yahweh nihag ruach qadim, ba'aretz kol hayom hahu v'chol halayla haboker haya v'ruach qadim nasa te'arbeh. And Moshe stretched out his staff upon the land of Egypt. And Yahweh nihag ruach qadim, and Yahweh created or drove an east wind. We'll talk about this east wind in a second. By the way, it's an east wind that was created, that was used to split the Red Sea. The same ruach qadim. Ba'aretz kol hayom. So this east wind, and by the way, for all of us who've lived in Israel, we know what an east wind can mean. The east wind brings the hamsin. It brings hot air from the desert, and in the summertime, spring or summertime, you can have in Israel a week of hamsin, which is this dry, dusty air where you can barely see. Honestly, it's actually dangerous to drive. It's almost like driving in fog, but it's not fog. It's dust. It's blown in from I believe it comes from the Saudi Arabian desert, and can cover the entire land of Israel, usually for 2 or 3 days, but sometimes it can last even a week. Okay. So that's a dry east wind bringing in all the stuff from the desert. Okay. Nihag ruach qadim ba'aretz kol hayom. So he created or drove an east wind upon the land of Egypt all day, all of that day, v'chol halayla, and all of that night, haboker, and in the morning haya v'chol halayla, haboker haya v'ruach qadim nasa. In the morning, it was that this east wind was carrying the locust. So in a certain sense, Pharaoh had warning, right? So we had a day and a night where this east wind was blowing. So Pharaoh saw this hamsin coming in, this strong, hot, dry, dusty east wind, And he's like, uh-oh, this is not going to end well, probably, or hopefully that's what he's thinking. And then the following morning, then the locusts were coming in on the east wing, on the east wind, not the east wing. Wasn't that a TV show, the east wing? Or was it the west wing? I don't know. I don't watch a lot of TV. Okay. So, verse 14. وَيَعَلْ هَأَرْبَعَ الْكُورِ أَرِتْ مِصْرَيِم وَيَنَخْ بِكُلْ גבול מצרים כבד מאוד לפניו לא היה כן הרבה כמוהו ואחריו לא יהיה כן. And the locusts went up upon all of the land of Egypt. וינח בכל גבול מצרים, and they rested, they settled throughout all of the borders of Egypt. כבד מאוד, a very heavy amount. לפניו לא היה כן הרבה כמוהו ואחריו לא יהיה כן. And again, we have the same statement that we had regarding a similar statement that we had regarding the barad, regarding the hail, that there was never anything like it before, and there was never a locust plague like it before, and there never will be again. Okay, so this was out of the ordinary. This was 9.3 on the Richter scale regarding locusts. Okay, nothing like it had ever been seen before. Nothing like it will ever be seen again in the land of Egypt. Verse 15, Yachasat Ain Kol Haaretz, and it covered the entire view of the land, meaning you couldn't see anything. The locust infestation was so thick that you couldn't see anything, right? It was like being in a fog, except it was a fog of dust and locusts. And the land became dark. Okay, Yochal et kol esef haaretz, and it ate, meaning the locusts ate all of the plants, the grass of the land. It called pri ha'etz, and all of the fruits off the trees. One second here. I just want to think something to myself. Okay. Asher otir habarad. So they ate all of the grass and all of the fruits which the hail had left behind or left over. Lo notar kol yerek ba'etz u'ba'esev hasadeh v'chol eretz Mitzrayim, and there did not remain kol yerek ba'etz, a single bit of greenery upon the trees, and on the grasses of the field. Basically, all of the vegetation of Egypt was completely consumed by this locust plague, and this locust plague was so thick and so heavy that the sky was dark. Okay, you couldn't. It was like nighttime, basically, right? The land became dark. The locusts were so thick, were so heavy in their amount that the entire land became dark. So picture that, right? I don't know if you've ever been through a locust infestation. I've been through some kind of minor ones in Israel, but nothing like this, that's for sure. Okay. And Pharaoh hurried, calling to Moshe and Aaron, V'yomer hatati li Yahweh Elohechem lachem. So he's back to his old games. Now he's in dire straits. So now he's back to saying, I've done wrong to Yahweh, your God, and to you. So now he's back to saying how he's wrong and God is right, and all the same old BS that he said before we went during the plague of hail. Okay? So we see the same thing. When Pharaoh's in dire straits, he's wrong, God is right, he's ready to promise to let Israel go, and as soon as the hard times disappear, then he forgets his promise again and again and again. Okay, verse 17. So now, sana hatati achapa'am. In other words, forgive me just one more time. Okay, literally, now, sana hatati. Sa is, I guess, literally lift up, but it means to forgive my sin. Achapam, even this time. Okay, but the implication here is just forgive me this time. Atiru li Yahweh, and entreat Yahweh, pray to Yahweh Elohechem, your God. V'sema alai rak et hamavet hazeh, and just get this death off of me, right? He's calling this plague a death, right? Just get this death away from me, right? So Pharaoh is in pain. He's in pain and suffering, and he's ready to promise the world, as we've seen so many times before. Okay, verse 18. V'tzemi in Paro, u'yatar el Yahweh. And he went out from Paro and prayed to God, or entreated God. verse 19. Yafoch Yahweh Ruach Yam. And by the way, Volki, here's the word Yahafoch. Okay? In Exodus chapter 10, verse 19, if you want to look it up, the word you asked me about. Fech. Okay, Yafoch Yahweh Ruach Yam. And God reversed the wind, basically. He turned it around to the other direction, so it's a Ruach Yam. So it's a wind that comes from the sea. What sea are we talking about? Whenever we talk about a sea, whenever we talk about the sea, we are generally talking about the Mediterranean Sea, if we're talking about that area. Okay, so Egypt is south, not always south, but kind of southeast of the Mediterranean Sea, right, and west. So Ruach Yam might imply the wind is now, well, Yam usually means to the west, because usually it's being spoken about from the perspective of the land of Israel, and I assume that that's specifically what it's referring to here. So I would translate that as a west wind. Okay, so Ruach Yam would be a west wind, Hazak Me'od, a very strong west wind, V'yisad Arbeh, and it carried the locust, V'yitka'ehu Yama, and it means like push them, Yama to the west, Yama Suf. So we now explicitly know to the Sea of Reeds. Okay, so the west wind came and pushed them out to the Sea of Reeds, or what we call today the Red Sea. And there did not remain a single locust within all of the borders of Egypt. And it will be of no surprise, Yechazek Yahweh et lev Pharaoh v'lo shilach et bnei Yisrael. And Yahweh, literally, Lechazek means, Chazak means strong, but and Yahweh strengthened the lave of the heart of Pharaoh. That's a bad translation, right? Because strengthening a heart implies something positive. So I will translate that as made obstinate or made stubborn. God made obstinate the heart of Pharaoh. V'lo shilach et bnei Yisrael. He did not let the children of Israel go. Okay, and then we have here. I always like to point out, well, not always, but here we have a peh. That's the end of this peh means Parshat Ptucha. It means it's basically the end of a chapter in the Masoretic texts. Okay, in the original Hebrew Bible, this would now represent a major chapter end. So that's it. Okay, that's the end of that chapter, the end of the 8th plague. Where do we have our previous peh? So again, we always keep in mind here at the end of the 7th plague, there was a peh. This letter here, Marianne, pay attention. That letter that is now being highlighted, that's the letter peh. It's the P or F sound, that P or F sound. Okay, and it represents in the Hebrew manuscripts and the Hebrew text, it represents it basically at what we can call a chapter ending. Okay. So now we're getting to the second to last plague, the 9th plague. And any questions, any comments? Anybody want to say anything at this point? Anyone have any questions? We're going to go for about another hour or so, max. And then I'm going to end it because it's over 2 hours. Well, it's been approximately 2 hours now. And 3 hours is my limit. I'm dead after that. So we'll get through as much as we can. So any questions, any comments before we move on? No? All right, well, type in. If you have any questions or comments, please feel free to type in. Okay. So we're up to the 9th plague. I've got low battery. You know what? Whenever I get the low battery, I have to go get the plug. I need a break for 5 minutes anyway. We're going to take a 5-minute break. I'm going to put on some nice music, and we'll take it from there. How's that? So I'll be back in 5-10 minutes max, and I'm going to put on some music.
Hakham Melech, Hashem Malach, Hashem Imloch, לעולם ועד. השם מלך, השם מלך, השם ימלוך לעולם ועד. והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי ננאי 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 נאי 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 נאי. השם מלך, השם מלך, השם ימלוך לעולם ועד. השם מלך, השם מלך, השם ימלוך לעולם ועד. והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי ננאי 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 נאי נאי ננאי נאי נאי. אוי נאי 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 השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה השם אחד ושמו אחד. אוי והיה השם למלך על כל הארץ, ביום ההוא יהיה אוי ננאי 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 נאי 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 נאי. אוי נאי נאי נאי.
I see a bad moon rising. I see trouble on the way. I see earthquakes and lightning. I see bad times today. Don't go around tonight, 'cause it's bound to take your life. There's a bad moon on the rise. I hear hurricanes are blowing. I know the end is coming soon. I feel rivers overflowing. I hear the voice of rage and ruin. Don't go around tonight, 'cause it's bound to take your life. There's a bad moon on the rise. got your things together. Hope you are quite prepared to die. Looks like we're in for nasty weather. An eye is taken for an eye. And don't go around tonight, 'cause it's bound to take your life. There's a bad moon on the rise. And don't go around tonight, 'cause it's bound to take your life. There's a bad moon on the rise. There's a bad moon on the rise. It's on the rise.
מקימי מעפר וישפוט ירים אביון להושיבי עם נדיבים עם נדיבי עמו מי כהשם אלוקינו המגביהי לשבת המשפילי לראות בשמיים ובארץ אוי מקימי מעפר דל וישפוט ירים אביון אוי להושיבי עם נדיבים עם נדיבי עמו na 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 na.
Did you let Lavi in? Let him in. What? All right. As soon as he's done eating, let him in, okay?
המגביהי לשבת המשפילי לראות
Okay.
בשמיים
Turn the music down a bit.
ובארץ
Okay, welcome back to the World Alliance of Qara'im study. This is Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im, and we will continue from where we were. I think we're having an extremely interesting study this time. They always are, but interesting stuff. Alrighty. All right, let's turn the music off. So we are up to the 9th plague of darkness. So let's do it. Darkness. Exodus chapter 10, verse 21. ויאמר יחווה אל משה נטה ידך על השמיים ויהי חושך על ארץ מצרים וימש חושך. So Yahweh said to Moshe, stretch out your hand upon the heavens, and this time it's upon the heavens, right? So the darkness perhaps is coming from the heavens. And let there be darkness upon the land of Egypt, and let the darkness be palpable, and that the darkness shall be felt. Okay? So what could that even mean? Well, it could be like a thick fog. I mean, let's say you're in smoke, I'm just giving an example. I'm not saying it was smoke, but if you're in a smoky room and it's dark, you can literally feel, you can sense the smoke, right? It's something that can be felt. So maybe something along those lines. We don't know what it was, okay? But it's so dark that you could feel it. It was so thick, the darkness, or whatever was causing the darkness that blotted out the sun, or that blotted out the light even right in front of you, right? Could be felt. Let's say a very, very, very thick fog, right? It can be quite dark. Sufi, you have to get off the table. Say hi to Sufi. Sufi, you are a mischievous one. Yes, you are. You are a very mischievous girl. Go. So, yeah. So I mean, even in the thick fog, right? It's pretty dark, and you can't even see, 5 feet in front of you, right? So picture that, except 1,000 times worse. Okay, verse 22. V'ya'et Moshe et yado ala shamayim. And Moshe stretched out his hand towards the heavens. V'ahi choshech hafela v'chol eretz Mitzrayim shloshit yamim. And there was I guess you could say, well, afela. I'll talk about this in a second. Darkness, afela. We just saw this word actually earlier. I just want to check an official definition of it. Darkness, gloominess, calamity, right? So it's basically a synonym for darkness. Okay, so how would we translate this? Choshech afela, like darkness, or I wouldn't know. It doesn't really work in English. But the point that I'm trying to make is that we have something here that we've mentioned many, many times before, is that when we have repetition, one second, please. One second. Sorry about that. Okay. When we have repetition, so this is choshech is a word for blackness or darkness. Afela is a word for darkness. Okay, and so these two words are synonyms. And so this is, in a sense, a repetition, or a repetition of the same concept. Okay, darkness, or black darkness, maybe you can translate it as. And we know that in the Torah, when we have repetition, repetition represents emphasis. So it means like very, very darkness, like severe darkness. Okay, B'chol Eretz Mitzrayim. One second, please. I'm sorry. B'chol Eretz Mitzrayim shloshit yamim. Okay, so there was this black darkness, or this severe darkness, throughout all the land of Egypt for 3 days. Lo ra'u ish et achiu, v'lo qamu ish mitachtao shloshit yamim. ולכל בני ישראל היה אור במושבותם. Right, so there's a couple of things I wanted to say. First of all, I'm not going to go into detail, but this is the same word we saw in Exodus chapter 9. Let me just show you. Not the same root, I should say. Okay, so when we were speaking about the wheat and the spelt being unripe, we said that really what it said is it was in a stage of darkness. It was dark, okay? And we said that that probably means dark green. In other words, it was in a grassy stage. So that word was afilot. And here we have the word choshech afela. It's the same root, okay? This darkness. So there was black darkness, okay? B'chol Eretz Mitzrayim shloshit yamim, verse 23. לא ראו את אחיו ולא קמו איש מתחתיו. So nobody was able to see his fellow man. People were not able to see each other. ולא קמו איש מתחתיו, and no one was able to even get up from where they were. שלושת ימים, for 3 days. ולכל בני ישראל היה אור במושבתם. But all of the children of Israel had light in their habitations. Okay. So again, distinction between what Egypt is getting and what Israel is getting. The distinction is being made. That'll be more explicit in the 10th plague, verse 24. ויקרא פרעה אל משה ויאמר לכו עבדו את יהוה רק צאנכם יצעק גם טפכם ילך עמכם. So now Pharaoh is backing off his concessions a little bit. If you remember with the plague of before the locusts, he asked who's going to be going, and Moshe said everybody's going, and Pharaoh said no, you're up to no good. Only the now Pharaoh is saying, okay, we're going to negotiate here. This is the Shuk Machane Yehuda. This is the marketplace in Jerusalem. So Pharaoh, who again is negotiating from a point of very much from a point of weakness, is still trying to pretend to himself and that he has the upper hand, and is still trying to he has nothing in his poker hand, but he still thinks he does, but he ain't got nada. He's got nothing. Okay. So what is he saying? Okay, I'll back off my concession, or I'll back off my requirement that only the adult males can go, and but now you can also bring the children with you. Okay. Okay, but you have to leave the goats or the sheep, flocks, and behind. 4, women, children, flocks, and sheep, they can't go. Only the males can go. Now, if I was saying, okay, the children can go with you, and ostensibly also the women, because the women will have to take care of the children, right? And that's implied by him saying, if I was saying only the cattle, the flocks, and the herds shall be left behind. The just call them sheep and cows. Okay, only the sheep and the cows should be left behind. So that implies that the women would go, even though it doesn't mention it explicitly. Is she meowing because she wants food? Because she's starting to drive me crazy. Okay. Well, I don't know what. And why did you not bring Lavi in? Try bringing Lavi in, so he's not all alone there in the sunroom. Okay. If they start meowing too much, what? Yeah, that's a good idea. Why don't you do that? That's even better. And feed them whenever you want. Okay, I don't mind the meowing. Okay, so now Pharaoh is backing down a little bit. So he's basically trying to negotiate, right? He's trying to be like large, like okay, let's meet in the middle somewhere. We're gonna compromise, okay, you want to sell me the stock for 85. I want to buy for 75. Make a deal here, right? Sound like Donald Trump or something. But he's negotiating from a position of weakness. He's got, as we said, nothing in his poker hand, right? And so Moshe ain't going for that. That's for sure, right? Verse 25. Remember Moshe, Gam ata ten biadenu zevachim velot v'asinu liyahweh Eloheinu. So the way I interpret this verse is, and we can check into translations, is Moshe is basically responding, saying, "Oh, are you going to give us sacrifices?" Literally, okay. Yomer Moshe gam ata titen biyadenu, and then Moshe said, "Will you give into our hands zivachim, animals to slaughter for sacrifices, olot, or shall we say sacrificial animals, and animals for burnt offerings, asinu liyahweh Eloheinu, for us to do for Yahweh our God." In other words, when I interpret this verse, is Moshe saying back, "Oh, really? You want the sheep and goats and cattle to remain behind? Then are you going to give us animals for us to sacrifice to our God?" Okay, I'm curious to see if some of the other translations go along with that. So this is Exodus 10:25. So Robert Alter has a comment here. Let's look at it. Oop. Okay, that doesn't matter. Okay. Okay. Moses is at least as uncompromising as in his previous encounter with Pharaoh. His immediate rejoinder to Pharaoh's stipulation about the livestock is that the Egyptian monarch himself will provide the sacrifices. This pugnacious response might nevertheless have allowed Pharaoh momentarily to infer that Moses was agreeing to the condition about leaving this livestock behind, but in his next sentence, Moses vigorously disabuses Pharaoh at this allusion. So I think actually that Robert Alter misses the point. I think that this means, even though literally what it says is, you will also give us the animals for sacrifices and burnt offerings, so that we may do them. I think I think this is actually a question, and what Moshe is saying is, then will you also give us? Will you give us these animals for us to sacrifice? In other words, he's responding to Pharaoh's negotiations by saying, then how are we going to have the animals, right? I'm curious to see how Everett Fox deals with that one. So it's 1025. You must also give slaughter offerings and offerings up in the hands, so that we may sacrifice for you, for Yahweh our God. So they're both translating it as a sentence, which is as a statement, a declarative statement. But really, I think the implication here is really a question. That's my interpretation or my understanding of the verse, that Moshe is coming back and saying, will you then give us animals for us to sacrifice? Okay, no. Answer, it's a rhetorical question. Answer, no. Then verse 26, וגם יקננו ילך עמנו, לא תישאר פרסה, כי ממנו ניקח לעבוד את יהוה אלוהינו, ואנחנו לא נדע מה נעבוד את יהוה עד בואנו שמה. So also our cattle will go with us. In other words, all of our animals will also go with us. Lo nishar parsa, a hoof will not remain behind. Okay, parsa. This is the same word we see in Leviticus 11, speaking about the laws for kosher food, where it says poreset parsa, literally, or you should translate it as how do they translate it into English again? Cleft hoof? No. Cloven hoofed, right? In other words, that where the one of the requirements for the kosher animals is that the hoof has to be split to two. There has to be a visible division in the hoof, right? So poreset parsa is what it is in Hebrew. Okay, so that's the same word here. Okay, so literally not a hoof will remain behind. In other words, all the animals have to go. Because we will take from them, in other words, we'll use the animals to worship Yahweh Eloheinu, to worship Yahweh our God. And we don't know how we're supposed to worship, how we're supposed to sacrifice, or how we're supposed to serve Yahweh until we get there. In other words, Moshe he's playing games with Pharaoh, right? He's making up an excuse, but Pharaoh has no choice. Pharaoh has no arrows in his quiver at this point. Okay, and Moshe knows it, and Pharaoh is pretending. See, Pharaoh's illusion of power is gone. It's it's almost like I've been listening lately a lot to a certain YouTube channel that speaks about narcissistic relationships, and basically the narcissist, if one is in a relationship with a narcissist, the narcissist is able to pull the wool over the eyes of the other person for a long, long time, and make the other person, or pretend that there's something that they're not, right? And the channel that I listen to calls this the narcissistic fog. The other person is like caught in this fog, believing the lies of the narcissist. And eventually this collapses, right? The illusion collapses, and the other person exits the narcissistic fog and is able to see the truth. Well, this is exactly what's happening here, right? Pharaoh is still testing Moshe. The way I interpret this, Pharaoh is still testing Moshe, or maybe even believes that Moshe is still believing the lie that Pharaoh is something special, that Pharaoh still has arrows in his quiver with which to negotiate, still believes that Pharaoh is something special, still believes that Pharaoh is God incarnate, as the pharaohs in ancient Egypt believed about themselves, and Pharaoh also perhaps believes it. And so he's still playing his hand as if he is something more than he is, even though slowly but surely the truth of how pathetic and empty and small this man known as Pharaoh is, especially in comparison to Yahweh, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But Moshe is not giving him any leeway whatsoever. Moshe is showing him straight to his face that he sees the true Pharaoh as the zero, as the ephes, the nothing, small man, the powerless man that he really is. Verse 27, Yechazek Yahweh et lev Paro v'lo ava lishalcham. So Moshe responds, he doesn't concede at all. Just didn't concede last time. He doesn't concede at all, and it says Yechazek. Chazak means strong. So Yahweh strengthened, but again, I don't like that translation. He made stubborn the heart of Pharaoh, and he did not, and he chose not to, or did not want to send them to let them go. Okay, verse 28. ויאמר לו פרעה, לך מעלי, ישמר לך, אל תוסף רעות פניי, כי ביום ראותך פניי תמות. And then now Pharaoh, he ain't got much left. So what does he do? He threatens Moshe, right? This pathetic loser, this pathetic small man who now realizes that he's not a god. Maybe he doesn't even quite realize it yet, but he's going to realize it real soon. And realize that Moshe realizes that he's a nothing. Starts using the last thing that he possibly can, which is threaten to kill him. Okay, this is a death threat. Okay, and only small, pathetic people make death threats, unless it's evil people and they have a reason to do it. All right. Anyway, Yomer lo paro lech me'alai. So Pharaoh says, away from me. Shemer lecha al tosif raot panai, and make sure you don't ever see my face again. Ki biyom raotcha panai tamut, because on the day you see my face, you will die. So Pharaoh issues a fatwa on Moshe, and Moshe, who knows this whole thing is an issue of the tides turning, right? Moshe now slowly but surely, Moshe started down here, Pharaoh was up here. Through the plagues, tide has turned. Moshe has become higher and higher. Pharaoh has become lower and lower, and now Moshe knows that he's way above Pharaoh, and he strikes. Right, he really is ready to finish Pharaoh off through, of course, God's direction. Verse 29, and Moshe says, you have spoken well. I will never see your face again. Again, paraphrasing. Okay, now we're up to chapter 11. It is getting late, so I'm going to have to go into express mode, which means that I'm not going to stop and so Solomon Zeohru says, do you have Bible Hebrew audio? If you go onto YouTube and you type in the book that you want, you'll find many online audio. You'll find many audio recitations of the Bible. So, for instance, you could type in book of, I don't know, Kings, or book of, let's say, book of Samuel, or book of Deuteronomy. Okay, audio or something like that. If you do that on YouTube, you'll find there's no shortage of oral recitations of the books of the Bible. Okay, so Exodus 11. I'm now going to try to get through. We have to go through to the middle of 13. So I'm just going to read minimal translation, minimal interpretation, minimal exposition, unless I have something very important to say, because I would like to get through the portion. First, so we're in chapter 11, verse 1. Exodus chapter 11, verse 1. ויאמר יהוה אל משה עוד נגע אחד אביא על פרעה ועל מצרים, אחרי כן ישלח אתכם מזה, ישלחו קרא יגרש אתכם מזה. So one last plague, and then he's going to get you the heck out of here completely. chala, completely. Verse 2, Daber na be'aznei ha'am, וישאלו איש מאת רעהו ואישה מאת רעותה כלי כסף וכלי זהב. So now he God tells Moshe to tell the people to ask for spoils, ask for silver and gold from the Egyptians. Okay, this is a promise. This is the fulfillment of a promise that's mentioned in Genesis chapter 15 in the Brit Ben Abitarim, the covenant of the split animals. And I'll just reference that very quickly. Let's just look at the English so I can make the point. Yeah, there we go. So God appears to Abraham and says, okay, as the sun was setting, Abram fell into, it was not yet Abraham, Abram fell into a deep sleep and a thick and dreadful darkness came over him. Then the Lord said to him, Yahweh said, know for certain that for 400 years your descendants will be strangers in a country that is not their own, and they will be enslaved and mistreated there. As we've spoken about before, the 400 years, in my opinion, starts from this day, from the count starts at this covenant. But I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. Okay? I will punish the nation they serve as slaves, and afterward they will come out with great possessions. So this is now, all these plagues that we're seeing are the fulfillment of this promise, right? The Israelites were enslaved. The nation of Egypt, which enslaved them, is being punished. Of course, the nation is not mentioned here in Genesis 15. It turns out to be the Egyptians. And afterwards, they will come out with great possessions. Okay? And the Hebrew there, hello, internet. That's the internet. Oh my. Okay. Afterwards, they will come out with great possessions, with a great amount of possessions. This promise that was given to Abraham 400 years earlier is now being fulfilled here. God is telling Moshe to tell the Israelites to ask the Egyptians for klei kesef and klei zahav, vessels of silver and vessels of gold. And they are out of fear, even though it says hain, they're now going to, well, let's read. Verse 3, وَيِتِنْ يَحْوَيْ et chayin ha'am be'enei Mitzrayim, וגם האיש משה גדול מאוד בארץ מצרים בעיני עבדי פרעה ובעיני העם. And God made the people of Israel, or the people, literally it means like gave them grace in the eyes of Egypt, but really I think it was probably more like fear. I've never understood this, honestly, why this word is used here. I'll have to go back and study it myself, but gave grace in the eyes of in other words, the people of Egypt decided to give all of their possessions, quote unquote, to give all their possessions away to the Israelites. Okay? But really, obviously, it's out of fear and awe for this man, Moshe. I would love to see different commentaries on the use of this idea of chayin, because literally it means that God gave the grace of the people in the eyes of Egypt, right? That they it's almost as if they loved them so much they wanted to give them silver and gold. But I don't think the Egyptians loved the people of Israel very much. It was more like fear. So it was just a strange use of this phrase. Anyway, one of these days I'll go back and look at some commentaries on it. Aish Moshe Gadol Ma'od be'eretz Mitzrayim. Moshe was considered very great in the land of Egypt, in the eyes of the servants of Pharaoh and in the eyes of the nation. Notice, not in the eyes of Pharaoh himself, just in the eyes of the servants and in the eyes of the people. Verse 4, Yomer Moshe, Ko Amar Yahweh, Kahasot Halayla, Ani Yotze B'toch Mitzrayim. Moshe says, V'yomer Moshe Kol Mari Yahweh, and so Moshe said, so says Yahweh, at midnight, in the middle of the night. And there's a whole thing we could say about that, but we won't get into it, about the different watches, the first watch, the second watch, the third watch, the middle of the second watch, it's the middle of the night. The nights were shorter in the middle of the night. Well, it always comes at exactly the same time, actually, but the middle of the night, the hours, quote unquote, hours were shorter in the summertime, longer in the wintertime. I'm not going to get into all that right now. Ani yotzei b'toch Mitzrayim, I will go out among Egypt. God says to Moshe, Met kol bechor be'eretz Mitzrayim, yechor paro hayoshev al kis'o ad bechor hashivha asher ahar harehayim bechor bechor behema. So all of the firstborn of Egypt will die, from the firstborn of Pharaoh who sits on his throne until the firstborn of the concubine who sits behind the stone, the grinding stone. Grinding Rechaim is the mill stones, actually. So there are two stones, the upper stone and the lower stone. And you turn them in order to grind the wheat or the barley, the grass seeds, into flour. Okay, Chol bechor beheman, all the firstborn of the animals. So even the firstborn of the animals are going to die. Okay, we've spoken about the idea of the firstborn many times before, the importance of the concept of the firstborn in the Torah, especially in the book of Genesis, and now here we have in the book of Exodus, right? And so we see once again this issue of the firstborn. Okay, and Israel is called the firstborn, right? That's originally when Moshe said to Pharaoh, right? Israel, b'ni bechori, is my son, my firstborn son. And let my firstborn son go, or I will kill your firstborn son. And now it's happened. Okay. Verse 7. And against all of the children of Israel, a dog shall not even sharpen his tongue, shall not whet. Whet, right? Like prepare himself for the kill. Okay. So not even a dog will whet his tongue upon a person or upon an animal. So nothing's going to happen to any of the children of Israel. In order that you should know, who should know? Everybody, Egypt, Israel, the entire world should know that God makes a distinction. That God yafle pole. Pele, no, I'm sorry, it's not for Pele, it's with an aleph. So it makes a distinction between Egypt and Israel. Okay, so God, it's going to be clear, and we saw this before, right? That there was no darkness in Goshen, there was no locusts in Goshen, etc. So now it's explicit that there's going to be a distinction, a clear distinction made between Egypt and Israel. The firstborn of the Egyptians are going to die, and the firstborn of the Israelites, not even a dog will whet his tongue against the Israelites. Okay, verse 8. Yardu kol avadecha ele elai v'ishtahu li lemor tzeh ata v'chol ha'am asher beraglecha ve'acharei chen etzeh v'yetzeh na'im paro b'chari'af. So this is all Moshe speak to Pharaoh specifically. So all of your servants will come down to me, and they will bow before me, and they will say, so you and all the people all the nation that is with you, get out. And afterwards I will go out, meaning I and the people of Israel will go out of Egypt, and exited from Pharaoh inflamed or angry, right? Furious. Okay, verse 9. 10. ויאמר יחווה אל משה לא ישמע אליכם פרעה במענה רבות מופתי בארץ מצרים. So God says that Pharaoh is not going to listen to Moshe. ומשה ואהרון עשו כל המופתים האלה לפני פרעה ויחזק יהוה את לב פרעה ולא ישלח את בני ישראל מארצו. So Moshe and Aaron, so this is kind of a summary sentence. Here, Moshe and Aaron were the ones, or did all of these wonders before Pharaoh, and Yahweh strengthened, or made strong, or made obstinate the heart of, so I have to find a better translation, made strong the heart of Pharaoh, v'lo shilach et bnei Yisrael mi'atzo, and he did not let the people of children of Israel leave his land, go out of his land. Verse chapter 12. Well, there's a lot going on here. Now we really get into the laws of the Passover and unleavened bread. We've spoken about this many times before in other contexts. So much to say here. We could spend literally another 5 hours on it. But alas, time is slipping away. So we're not going to. I'm just going to read through it very quickly, maybe make a comment or two. Okay? ויאמר יהוה אל משה ואל אהרון בארץ מצרים לאמור החודש הזה לכם ראש חודשים ראשון הוא לכם לחדשי השנה. This month is for you. This is a major verse, an extremely important verse for Karaism, for Karaites. This month for you shall be the head of the month, shall be the first of the month. Shon hu lachem lachadshei shana is the first for you among the months of the year. Which month are we talking about? The month of the Aviv. Okay. We spoke about the Aviv from chapter 9, right? Now it's mentioned that this month, the month of the Aviv, is to be the first month. So much to say about that. Those of you who have studied with me before and who know about Karaism understand the importance of that verse. Okay, but no time right now. דברו אל כל עדת ישראל לאמור בעשור לחודש הזה ייקחו להם איש שא לבית אבות שא לבית. So each person is supposed to take the month. This is 5 days before the actual Exodus is going to occur. You're going to take a seh. Set, we have our list of animal names, so animal terms. Set is here, so one of the flock, so it means a sheep or a goat. It could be any age, young or old, and it could be a male or a female. So it means basically any sheep or any goat. The Beit Avot set lebayit, so each person should take one sheep or goat for his household. Verse 4. ואם ימעט לבית מאות מסה, ולקח הוא ושכנו הקרוב אל ביתו ומכסת נפשות איש לפי אכלו תכוסה על הסה. In other words, if the household is too small, then you can split a sheep or goat with your neighbor or neighbors. In other words, what's the purpose behind this idea? We don't want any of the animal left over. This is a sacrifice. This is a sacred animal that's going to be sacrificed in the name of Yahweh, right? And so the Torah is going out of its way to point out that you don't just take a sheep and then, you only eat half the sheep and it's not enough to feed the whole family. Split it with another family so there's no leftovers, right? We'll talk more about the leftovers in a bit. Shouldn't be any leftovers lichatchila, but if there are leftovers, then bidi avad, then you burn it. Verse 5. ست תמים זכר בן שנה יהיה לכם מן הכבשים ומן העזים תיקחו. So unblemished male yearling sheep or goat. It says explicitly מן הכבשים ומן העזים, from among the sheep and among the goats. Verse 6. והיה לכם במשמרת עד 14 יום לחודש הזה ושחטו אותו כל קהל עדת ישראל בין So you keep it, mishmeret, until the 14th day of this month, and then you slaughter it ben arba'im, between the evenings. We've spoken about this before. Basically, this means the end of the day. In my opinion, it's the end of the 14th day, when the 14th day is turning into the 15th day. It's pretty clear from the context here, because later that night, on the 15th, God goes out at midnight, sends out the mashchit, destroying angel, to go out and kill him. So, end of the 14th day, right? Verse 7. V'lakahu min adam ונפנו על שתי המזודות ועל המשקוף על הבתים אשר יאכלו אותם בהם. So you're going to take the blood from this animal, you're going to put it on the mizuzot. Mizuzot are the side posts of the door. What do they have it translated again in English? Yeah, the doorposts. And then the mashkof is the upper. So the door has two side posts and one upper post. The mashkof, I believe they call the lintel. Lintel, L-I-N-T-L. Lintel. So basically, you take the blood. So on the 14th, when the 14th is becoming the 15th, on the 4th day of the month after sunset, before total darkness, between the evenings, between the sunsets, that's one person I know puts it. Then you slaughter the animal and you rub its blood on all over the doorposts. Okay, verse 8. So you're going to eat it on that night. You're going to roast it in fire, on the fire. And you eat it with unleavened bread and mirorim, and bitter herbs. Verse 9. So you can't eat it raw and you can't seethe it. You can't make a stew out of it in some kind of liquid. But you roast the entire animal on the fire. Its head, its innards, its stomach. Verse 10. So you're not supposed to leave it until the morning. That which is left is to be burnt in the fire. This, I've spoken about this verse before. This is a very, very enlightening verse in the way that biblical Hebrew works, okay, that the Torah speaks. So it says, I'll just translate it literally and I'll make a quick comment on it. Lo totiru mimenu ad haboker. Do not let any of it remain until the morning. It sounds like a pretty clear commandment. Nothing can remain of it until the morning, right? Then it says, va'anotar mimenu ad boker ba'esh tisrufu. But that which does remain into the morning shall be burnt in the fire. Sounds like a contradiction. The verse just said, don't let any remain in the morning. So what do you mean that which remains in the morning in the fire shall be burnt? Okay, this is very enlightening into the way that Torah works, and it sets up an idea that we see many other times, which has great implications. Okay, among many other commandments in the Torah, that this is what the rabbis would later call, although it has nothing to do with the rabbis, it's the same concept that they happen to use sometimes, a lichatchila and a b'diavad. Okay, ideally, you shouldn't leave anything over into the morning. But if it doesn't work out that way, that should be your intention, the lichatchila at the beginning. But if it doesn't work out that way and there is something left over to the morning, then it's burnt fire. That's the way this verse has to be understood. And many other verses in the Torah should also be understood this way. When we see two commandments that seem to be contradictions, or one seems to be a kind of a result of the other, then a lot of times can be understood as a lichatchila and a b'diavad, as something that should ideally be done, but if it doesn't work out, then secondarily do this other thing. Okay, verse 11. How should you eat it? Your loins girded, meaning your sash, your belt around your loins, your sandals on your feet, your shoes on your feet, your staff in your hand. In other words, eat it as if you're ready to get that heck out of Dodge, because you are. You should eat it hurriedly, and it's a Pesach, right? So now we get to what this word Pesach means. There's a lot of different opinions about what the word means, but we'll just stick with the most common understanding, which is passing over or omitting. Verse 12. وعبرت بأرض مصريم بليلة הזה והכיתי כל בכור בארץ מצרים מאדם ועד בהמה לכל אלוהי מצרים אעשה שפטים אני יהוה. So I'm going to pass through the land of Egypt at night on that night, and we know that's the night of the 15th, which again proves that the sacrifice, when it says Bina Arba'im on the 14th, between the evenings on the 14th of the month, it means at the end of the 14th, beginning of the 15th. And I will kill all of I will slay all of the firstborn in the land of Egypt, among humans, among animals. Now this is an interesting thing. And to all of the gods of Egypt, I will do judgments. I will make judgments. Does this mean that the Torah believes that the gods of Egypt really exist, but they're just weaker than Yahweh? Absolutely not. What I was trying to say is that the Egyptians believe that their gods exist, and by God killing all the firstborn, he is going to show the Egyptians and the Israelites and the entire world that these were false gods, figments of the Egyptians' imaginations, just as we saw back in Exodus chapter 5, verse 2, that Pharaoh was implying that Yahweh is a figment of Moshe's imagination. Now, Fochu, how the tides have turned, and now God is going to show the world that the Egyptian gods are the ones that don't exist, and he is the one that does exist, the Yahweh, the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the living God, the creator of heaven and earth, is the only God in existence, in the universe and beyond, and no other God exists. And this is going to be proven as so-called gods, the false gods, figments of the imagination of the Egyptians, are shown to be absolutely powerless, castrated eunuchs who cannot even defend their own firstborn of the Egyptians. Baruch Yahweh. Blessed be Yahweh. Verse 13, وَحَيَا هَدَامْ لَخَيْمْ لَأُوت عَلْ هَبَتِيمْ أَشَرْ أَتِمْ شَامْ وَرَأِيتِ أَتَ دَامْ وَأَصَحْتِ عَلَيْكَمْ وَلَوْ يِئَبْ بَخَيْمْ نَغَيْفْ نَمَشْخِيت بِحَقُّتِي بَأَرِتْ مِصْرَيْم. So the blood is going to serve as a sign. There are a number of things in the Torah which are spoken of as a sign. The blood is one of them. A sign is something that is visible to other people that represents something else. Okay, so sign is always visible or in the world. Okay, Shabbat is a sign. When Israel ceases from working, this is visible to Israel and to the rest of the world, and it's a sign. Okay, the Passover sacrifice, or the festival of unleavened bread, as we'll see in Exodus 13, is called a sign. This avodah, this thing that you have to keep each year. Okay, the Passover sacrifice and festival of unleavened bread is something that is visible to the entire world. If we were to do it, it's a sign. Okay, the Brit Milah, circumcision that occurs when a boy is 8 days old, is a sign. It's called a sign. It's a visible mark on the body of the boy. Okay, that represents the covenant between Yahweh and Israel, and this too is a sign. The blood, visible to all of Israel, to anyone else who wishes to look, is a sign, a visible sign of what? That in this case, it's going to be assigned to the Mashchit, the destroying angel, that he should pass over those houses when he comes to slay all the firstborn. Okay, verse 14. وَحَيَا hayom hazeh לכם לזיכרון וחג כותם אותו חג ליהוה לדורותיכם חוקת עולם תהגהו. Okay, so now this hag, speaking about the sacrifice and following 7-day holiday, okay, is going to be, now we're getting into the idea that this is now going to be the basis of the Passover sacrifice, the yearly Passover sacrifice, and the 7-day festival of unleavened bread that follows directly after the bringing of the Passover sacrifice. 15. שבעת ימים עשות תאכלו, אך ביום ראשון תשביתו שאור מבתיכם, כי כל אוכל חמץ ונכרתה נפש ההיא מישראל מיום הראשון עד היום השביעי. So 7 days, no eating of leavened bread. I've spoken about this verse a lot, and it does not imply all, in any way, shape, or form. Does not imply all fermented items such as yogurt, cheese, wine as the Egyptian Karaites foolishly believe and incorrectly believe. I'm not going to get into that right now. I've spoken about it many times before. Verse 16. וביום הראשון מקרא קודש וביום השביעי מקרא קודש יהיה לכם כל מלאכה לא יעשה בהם אך אשר יאכל לכל נפש הוא לבדו יעשה לכם. So now we're getting laws about the festival of unleavened bread. First and 7 days are days where you don't do work, kind of like a Shabbat, but the word here used is not melacha. Oh, I'm sorry, it is melacha. Kol melacha lo yaseh b'hem. Okay, but it says explicitly that you can prepare food. So any other than that, you can prepare food. Verse 17, ושמרתם את המסות כי בעצם היום ההוא הזה עשיתי את צבאותיכם מארץ מצרים ושמרתם את היום הזה לדורותיכם חוקת עולם. So keep the et hamatzot. It's a shorthand for the festival of unleavened bread. Chag hamatzot. So keep the festival of unleavened bread. It's on this very day. I took you and your hosts in your armies, or in your army formation, we could say, out of the land of Egypt. So therefore, you shall keep this day, really meaning these days, okay, throughout your generations. So that's the first. But these are the laws of yearly Passover sacrifice, which we don't bring at this point because we're not in control properly of the Temple Mount, and of the 7-day festival of unleavened bread of the Passover holiday. Verse 18, Barashon ב-14 יום לחודש בערב תאכלו מסות עד יום האחד ו-20 לחודש בערב. So again, this further solidifies the idea that Passover sacrifice, even though it says on the 14th, Bena Arba'im, between the evenings, implies the 14th, at the end of the 14th, beginning of the 15th, Passover sacrifice, because that's also when you start, once the sun goes down on the 14th, beginning of the 15th, although there's this gray area between sunset and total darkness called Bena Arba'im. At any rate, at that point, that's when you start keeping the fast. You start not eating leavened bread until the 21st. So basically, 15th, 17th, 18th, 19th, 21st, verse 19. שבעת ימים שאור לא ימסה בבתיכם כי כל אוכל מחמצת ונכרתה הנפש ההיא מעדת ישראל בגר ובאזרח הארץ. So no eating, no finding seor, related directly to the English word sour, sourdough. It's basically sourdough starter, yeast. Okay, kol ochel machmetzet. Machmetzet I've spoken about many times before. The Egyptian Karaites foolishly and incorrectly believe that this word refers to fermented foods. It doesn't. It's just another way of saying chametz. It just means leavened bread. Okay, so no leavened bread and no leavening agents to be found for 7 days. Nothing associated with bread or leavening thereof is to be found among you for 7 days. Kol machmetzet lo tchilu. Okay, and it proves it because machmetzet here is contrasted with matzot, unleavened bread, leavened bread. Verse 21. ויקרא משה לכל זקני ישראל ויאמר עליהם משכו קחו לכם צאן ומשפחותיכם ושחטו הפסח. So here we are at the 10th. We're at the 14th day. Okay, because that's when the Passover is. Well, I think it's really saying here, okay, so really I think, so, okay, it's just giving the, saying I think at this point, just to get the animal that is going to be used for the Passover sacrifice. Verse 22. ולקחתם אגודת הזו וטבלתם בדם אשר בסף והגעתם אל המשקוף ואל שתי המזוזות מן הדם אשר בסוף ואתם לא תצאו איש מפתח ביתו עד בוקר. So take Ezov. Ezov is hyssop. You should translate it as hyssop. What is hyssop? Hyssop is from the oregano family, which is ultimately the mint family. It's related to mint, thyme, basil, oregano, marjoram. and what we call in modern Israel zatar, which is sometimes called hyssop, sometimes called thyme. There's all kinds of different ways that I've heard people translate it, but it's basically Azov is probably very closely related, in my opinion, to modern day what we would call in Israel zatar, the zatar plant, which grows wild in the springtime, specifically in the springtime, right around this time, meaning right around the Chodesh of Aviv, the month of Aviv, all over Israel. Okay, verse 23. وعبر يحوى لتقوف مصرين ورعاية حطام على همشكوف وعلى شتي المزبزوت وصح يحوى على الفتح ولو يتين همشحيت لبو إل بتخم لتقوف. So when Yahweh comes out to strike Egypt, he's going to see the blood on the doorposts, and he's going to skip over. He's not going to allow the destroyer to come in and strike within that house. Verse 24. So you have to keep this for eternity. What is it referring to? Well, not putting blood on the doors. It's referring right back to the laws that we saw, specifically which are kept each year, which is the Passover sacrifice and the festival of unleavened bread. Verse 25. So when you go into the land of Israel, you keep this service, eating the Passover sacrifice and the 7-day festival of unleavened bread. Verse 26. So when your children ask you, why are you doing this? Why are you bringing a sacrifice on the 14th of the month of the Aviv, and why are you not eating bread for 7 days? Right? Speaking specifically about the Passover sacrifice. So why are you bringing the sacrifice? And you shall say, this is the Passover sacrifice to Yahweh, because who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt when he struck down Egypt, or when he struck Egypt, but he spared our houses. And the people bowed down and prostrated themselves. I want to get a translation on that for 1 second. So that's 27. So it's 12:27. So let's see anything for my own edification. Okay. So they went out and killed the Passover sacrifice and rubbed the blood on the doorposts. Okay, verse 29. And I'm going to stop no matter what in about 10 minutes. I'll try to get through the rest of this chapter. ויחווה הכה כל בכור בארץ מצרים ובכור פרעה היושב על כיסאו עד בכור השבי אשר בבית עבור וכל בכור בהמה. So all the firstborn were killed. Pharaoh's firstborn, the firstborn of the prisoner, Asher bebeit habor, who was in the dungeon, and all of the firstborn of the animals. Before we saw it was going to be from Pharaoh down to the concubine, to the firstborn of the concubine. So from the highest to the lowest, here we have a different lowest, and that's the prisoner who's sitting in the dungeon. Okay? Verse 30. Yaqam Pharaoh Laila hu bechol avada bechol Mitzrayim v'ti'i tzaka gdola b'Mitzrayim ki en beit asher en sham met. So that was all carried out. Verse 31. Vayikra leMoshe u'la'Aaron Laila u'yomer qumu sa'u mitoch ami גם אתם, גם בני ישראל, לכו עבדו את יחווה כדברכם. So now, Pharaoh calls to Moshe and Aaron, breaking his promise, right? Remember, Pharaoh said, if you see my face again, then you will die. Well, that's not the way it worked out. Pharaoh calls to Moshe and Aaron says, "Get out of here. I concede." And it's not Moshe and Aaron who die, but his firstborn and the firstborn of all of Egypt who died. So Pharaoh couldn't even hold on to his death threat. He was so weak at this point. Such a pathetic Ephes, pathetic zero. He was always a pathetic zero, but just didn't know it. The illusion of power, through the illusion of the power of his false gods, of his sinning nation, were now exposed for the bankrupt, pathetic eunuchs, powerless eunuchs that they were. Sometimes it takes a while for the truth to come out, but in the end, it always does. Verse 32, well, my, oh my, isn't that a turnaround? So now Pharaoh completely concedes all of his previous stipulations. So now the sheep and the cattle can go, the flocks and the cattle can go. And not only that, but bless me, have Yahweh, your God, bless me. So now Pharaoh went from not even recognizing the existence of Yahweh at the beginning in Exodus chapter 5, now conceding completely, seeing his entire nation destroyed around his eyes, seeing all of the firstborn dead, and then begging Moshe and Aaron to get out and have their God, Yahweh, bless him as well. Well, my, oh my, haven't we had a little bit of a turnaround? Verse 33, and the Egyptians hurried the Israelites out of there because they thought they were all going to die. Verse 34, we saw it, but this is also an important verse regarding the 18 minutes that the rabbis say you have to cook matzah within, a bunch of baloney. At any rate, so this is directly related to the idea of matzah, and as we see when the Israelites get out to the desert, they're going to cook the matzah. They're going to cook this dough into matzah, but they're taking the dough. It had no time to rise. They put it on their kneading troughs, and wrap it in their garments and go out of Egypt. Verse 35. בני ישראל עשו כדבר משה וישאלו ממצרים כלי כסף וכלי זהב ושמלות. Verse 36, ויהוה נתן את חיי העם בעיני מצרים וישאלו וינצלום את מצרים. So they got all the silver and gold, and they spoiled Egypt as they went out. They left certainly with a bang, and this was a fulfillment of promise made to Abram 400 years earlier. Verse 37, Sukkot, that was the first stop. So 600,000 adult males, not including the children, and also not including the women. The children and the women are implied together. Verse 38, Ram Erev Rav ala Itam Wason Bakar Mikne Kaved Ma'od. And also Erev Rav, they usually translate this as mixed multitude. They're later referenced probably as the Asaf Suf, the rabble, it's usually translated as the added on ones who tempt Israel to ask for meat, and that leads to destruction. At any rate, it seems that other people, lots of other people, also went out. Egyptians, who knows who else, with Egypt. Okay, go a little bit longer. I'm going to go down to verse 42 and then stop it. I'm tired. I'm hungry. It's been a long study. Verse 39. So this, we saw that they had the dough wrapped on their shoulders, in their kneading troughs, bowls on the shoulders, wrapped in their garments, and now they cooked that into what? The matzot, to loaves of matzah, cakes of matzah, Okay, so unless they got out from Ramses to Sukkot in 18 minutes, it takes longer than 18 minutes. You've all heard me say this many times before. You've been listening to me for a while. Verse 40. So they were in Egypt for how long? 430 years. Is that so? No, it's not true. Okay. If we check it out, it's a lot less than that. We even have some ages. We saw in last week's Parsha how old Moshe was when he was called to Egypt. That's 80. We saw how long Amram's age, we know Kahat's age, and we know Levi's age. Levi lived for 137 years. Kahat lived for 133 years. And Amram lived for 137 years. Okay? So, and unless they were all born when the other one was, let's see, we add 137, 133, so that's 270, and another 130. 270, 130 comes up to 400 approximately, and then 80. So 480 comes out, but then there's overlap. We spoke about this last year. I don't have time to get into it right now, but it seems to me that the 430 years that's being spoken about is a time from the time from when Abraham or Avram at the time was given the promise in Genesis 15. Verse 41, so at the end of this 430 years, from the time of Abraham, promised to Abraham, all of the armies of Israel went out of Egypt. And the final verse we're going to do for the study, Lal Shimurim Hu. What this means, a night of watchfulness, it's usually translated as. There's a lot of commentary on different opinions of what that might mean. Okay? But Lel Shimurim Hu Liyahweh Leotzi'am Me'eretz Mitzrayim Hu Halala Azet Liyahweh Shimurim Chol Bnei Yisrael Lidorotam. So basically, maybe the most common idea here is it's a night of watchfulness. You're supposed to wait for God on this night, right? The Israelites waited for God they were hovering inside their houses. The blood was on their doors. They were commanded not to leave the house. They had their loins girded. They had their belts on their loins, their staff in their hands. They had their shoes on their feet, and they were eating quickly, waiting to get the word to get the heck out, which happened Chatzot Halayla at midnight. That's when Ashrit, the destroyer, went around, destroyed all the firstborn of Egypt. So this idea is that the Israelites were waiting, Leil Shimurim, they were waiting for Yahweh to make its move, and so we have this commandment that it should be like that. Maybe we should think about or recreate this idea of waiting for God to show up and save us on the Passover, or at least that's what our ancient ancestors did. Okay, I'm going to end it here. There's a lot to say about these verses. I've spoken about them many times before. And then we've got Exodus 13, which goes into more laws about the subsequent Passover and the Pidyon Ben, the redemption of the firstborn. And we're supposed to be going up to 13:16. So that's what we're covering, basically, the dedication of the firstborn, redemption of the firstborn. So unfortunately, we don't have time to go through it right now. I'm going to end the study now. Does anyone have any questions? Does anyone have any comments before we end the study? Going once, going twice, and that's it. We're going to end here. I thank you all for joining me. This has been the Shabbat Torah study of Parshat Bo of the World of Qara'im. I am Hakham Melech ben Yaakov of the World Alliance of Qara'im. I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom and a Shabbat Tov, depending where you are in the world. And Be'ezrat Yahweh, we will see you again next week.